Well, I won't go around the room. I hope you are excited because I actually thought we're dealing with a whole set of policies and bits and pieces, and I thought this is actually a meeting where we're doing a lot of hard yards, and that probably, Jim, is not that exciting. And yet, I think as we consider some of the stuff, we are laying the foundation for a good year. So I hope for all of you folk that are engaged, I hope you can actually see this as being a really important meeting when we look at the agenda as it's being prepared by Ken and the team. The other thing is that I just wanted to pick up on, and I just signal it now, I want to pick up on some of the challenges. I think in ensuring that the rest of your elected member colleagues have the full understanding and confidence in what we do as a committee in terms of managing risk. And I know there is one particular paper on that, but there's a couple of other matters that I noted through the agenda where I would be keen that at the end of it, perhaps we just work out, while we know we're doing good business, how do we help our elected members deal with that? My final point, I guess, is firstly, again, I've mentioned Ken and the team. Just thank you to staff for the papers. I think they're, again, a very superb set, easy to review, and in my view, should enable us to have the right focus and to be able to discuss and get assurance. So with that, without further ado, apologies. Roger, I think you've got to go at 2, is that correct? Yep. I don't know whether you think you might have your microphone off, but I've seen your hand wave, and Claire, you're absent from 1 through 1:30 or thereabouts. So
Yes.
Brilliant. So I think otherwise, I've had no other indications. So look, I'll just move that we sustain those apologies. Could I have a seconder, please? I'll be looking your way a lot today, Jim. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Members' interests, are there any matters that we're discussing? We've also got the interest register and public excluded, but are there any matters that cause you concern around your interests? There being none, I move on to any late items. I haven't had any notice of late items, Ken, so we will carry on. Members, there's nothing that we need to extraordinarily consider. Fine. Confirmation of the order of the meeting. At this stage, anticipate going through as we have scheduled in the agenda. At 11:30, I hope that the auditors, Leon Pettersi, our audit director, will join us. And at 12:50, that's 10 to 1, we'll have a short presentation from Deanna McDonald, who is from Aon Insurance, who are the LAS brokers. And Ken, thank you for arranging this. It would be good for us to hear from them about the insurance market at the moment. It's pretty relevant. Otherwise, I think the program is pretty much as we anticipate. Claire, I know that you are trying to go out and come back. That means that probably you're missing the exciting, well, you probably will miss that in the exciting issue of outstanding management report items. So
yeah, I'm gutted. I'm sorry.
I figured you would be, so I just thought I'd let you know that. As I say, there's some hard yards we've got to do here, and that's one of them. Okay, cool. So we will confirm that as it stands. Could I move to item 5, please, which is the confirmation of the open minutes? Oh, do I need to do that? Thank you. Appreciate that, Jenny. Okay, I'll move that the order is confirmed. Can I please have a second of that? I'm looking like a Jim. I'll take your hand up first, Claire. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against, the meeting is confirmed. Thank you for that. Jenny, feel free to tell me if I am getting entirely out of whack here. That's fine. Right, could we then please move to the confirmation of the minutes? It was a Zoom meeting on the 8th of June. And again, for ease, I will move that these be received as a true and correct record. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Roger. Are there any matters of factual accuracy or correctness that people want to raise in those minutes?
Yes, Bruce.
Oh, sorry, Claire.
Yeah, just a minor thing on page 15 of our agenda, or page 8 of the minutes, about the COVID-19 impacts in the audit discussion. Just a very minor typographical thing on the 3rd paragraph. First line, more disclosure and fair value assessments were stressed. Doesn't need the A in it.
you. Appreciate that. Are there any other matters? So with that, I'll put the motion that these be received as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? Carried. Ken, just one matter of follow-up, and I'm looking here at page 12 of the agenda, and it's B, item B. We had been considering the internal audit report related to asset management planning review, and we had said that at the September meeting there would be a report. Is that something that we've got on an action list? I'm not certain that, I don't know, I don't know whether we should have or not, given it's September. Or are we sort of semi-covering that off later on? Dawn, I don't know. I'm reading relaxed.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Look. Actually, I think that is an oversight that it hasn't come to this agenda. But yeah. But Dawn, can we make the December meeting?
Look, I'm only trying to show that I'm a Hawkeye and have read the agenda papers, Ken, so that's fine. But so look, if December's fine, totally accept the LTP should take prominence in that one, Ken. But if we just make certain we don't lose sight of an action point, that's really, really superb. Okay, if I could then move on to the next item, please, which is my agenda, which is the risk management update. This is brilliant. We do anticipate spending up to an hour on this, and I think it's warranted. We had that very good meeting with David and I forget the other chap from KPMG last time as a workshop. Ross, thank you. Yeah. Very effective, and this really is the outcome of it. And I think in terms of my view that we're looking here at trying to set the framework for going forward. There are some really key issues for us to discuss and settle on, particularly around risk appetite. So I'm sure that you probably have a more expert and better way to put this, Jenny and George. So I'll leave it firstly in your hands to raise any matters you wish to for us at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to take the report as read and focus on the top risks in the risk appetite statement and walk through each risk and then the portfolio and take questions on the COVID debrief report and quarterly risk report after.
Brilliant. I'm happy to do that.
So the top risk document first. This is the results of the workshop that you talked about, and we've written up using a new format to try to make it clearer. The additional mitigation actions included are largely from the group business plans, and as per the workshop, we have raised the residual target risk appetite higher, apart from where there's been further robust discussion at the executive table, and they've agreed the residual levels. The exec have done a lot of robust discussion around these risks. And we also had them reviewed by KPMG after the workshop and got their input. So if we could walk through from there.
Right, that's brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. I'm sure we can. That's how I'd like to anticipate. One thing I'd like to do, Jenny, as we go through these, and I do think we should go them risk by risk, there's 13 of them, is that I'd like to encourage members to have a look at the risk appetite section. I'm not trying to skip over the second appendix, but the reality of it is that we are in going through these line or page by page, we're actually also in effect clearing the risk appetite. So I think that's actually really, really important. And indeed, some of them might seem a tad counterintuitive. So I think we should actually just have that discussion as we go through, if that's okay, Jenny. So before we hook in, and I must confess, we wanted to take it as read. Members, is anything from Jenny and George's actual report that you'd like to raise? Claire?
Yes, thank you. Just that there's some wording corrections that's needed on the summary of top risks, which is on page 27 of our agenda. Item 7, which is the failure of iwi mana whenua partnerships, in the last paragraph, oh, sorry, the last line, failure to meet its post-treaty settlement obligations, which I'd like them to be correct, because this is going to be used a lot, I think, as we go forward. I just love the work that's been done here, actually, Jenny, it's fantastic. We have had an instance, actually, where we've had a complaint from a mana whenua group that it relates to our the way council interacts with them. That's got absolutely nothing to do with post-treaty settlements. Yeah, I'd just like to point that out as well. So I don't know if, well, I guess it is covered there, actually, yeah. And then the next paragraph, paragraph 8, or cell 8, in the first line, if council does not have sufficient liquidity, there's a has there that doesn't need to be there.
Brilliant, thank you, Claire. Is there anything else, particularly on the report, before we get to the page-to-page review of the actual document? We're fine? Sweet. Look, just an opening comment from me. So Claire, thank you for your comments. I am on page 27, and I always like a diagram. So the heat maps always help me heaps. And I'd just like to reflect as what I saw as I read this, and it may be that Jenny or George, you want to correct me. I'm interested to see the movement that we anticipate, firstly through those group business plans to mitigate and therefore lower the residual risk. In other words, make it safer for us. We're more likely to meet our objectives. I'm also interested that actually for some of them, we anticipate controls that will reduce the risk lower. So that's good. We can talk about that one as well. Mm-hmm. But actually what I would like you to also think as we go through this are those which are in that sort of navy blue, almost an Otago colour, well done, where we have the initial mitigants and they will stay at a level. There is no further action that moves them into that sort of pinky colour and lower. So here goes the first hint at some of the risk settings we are prepared to adopt. I think that's fair to say. Jenny, correct me as I say if I've got this one wrong. So I would be very interested in ultimately the committee's view about the reasonableness of those settings. Everything gets moved out of the sort of the red danger zone, if I can call it that. It means those that are navy blue tend to be in that fringe between the yellow, orange and light red, whereas those for which we have identified even more action, they'll move into the safer area, if I can call it that, the less risk taken area of green. So it's somewhere down the track, we're going to have to make certain as we go through this that we're broadly happy with that. Okay, thank you. So look, let's move to first appetite, adequate staffing, capacity and capability to deliver council's objectives. Any comments on this? Jenny or George, anything that you need to help us with at the moment? Can you help me please with something which I presume is something you guys use here? Maximise Snapfire. What's Snapfire? It sounds great. I take it to say Snapfire. Is it an HR type system, is it?
Snapfire.
We can't hear anything if somebody's talking, sorry.
Snapfire is the web-based tool that we use along with some other councils for managing applications. All right, so it's particularly around the recruitment process per se as such. Okay, cool, that's fine. I figured that was the case, but it was worth checking. Okay, and above it, sorry, just to be slightly pointy-headed, is that right that we're looking, is this a future-oriented one where we say resources are secured through the long-term plan to
effectively deliver the 24-34 LTP. Interesting time frame. It's not a bad one to have, but I just want to check I got it right.
Yes, that's right, Mr. Chair. There are a range of new projects in there with a different focus, and so we have to secure the correct resource to deliver these projects. Interesting too that there seems to have been a bit of a natural attenuation in this this risk area, essentially as markets toughen up for staff. This becomes very difficult, but now in the COVID environment where we're looking at an increased level of unemployment, staff tend to stay longer and it becomes easier to recruit.
So, Gary, just following on from that, then perhaps to move to the risk appetite, panel 5 of the page, which I want to be careful here. We're saying we have our appetite is to have a high level of risk. Perhaps I'd just like to focus on whether that is the right setting, and are we happy with that? Jenny, are you able to give us an indication why we're running with a high one here?
Largely because the market is outside our direct control. So whilst we can, and we also are in a position where there are still some roles, like some of the engineers, where there is limited ability to recruit, and we can't just throw money at it.
Right, so that says to me, and I notice a point further down, that any further mitigation becomes too costly for council. So I think that goes back to Gary's point that we're subject to the market, but it does mean that we're saying, notwithstanding perhaps ongoing impacts of COVID and increase in supply, we in a sense have to accept that this remains a high risk. Looking at my committee members here, not staff, are you comfortable with that? Yes, Claire.
Well, I just feel that not being able to have the right people to do the job, like there's a number of problems that creates, and it delays, the actual implementation of projects. I've raised it before, but I think a key risk indicator is the length of time it takes to fill a position. And I totally appreciate what Jenny and Gary have mentioned about the difficulty in attracting certain people to, fill roles. But even so, like if we're just looking at the risk, like I don't know if there's a target for the time it takes to fill a position, but if it does take, 4 or 6 months, it just has a detrimental effect on the rollout of the project.
Anybody, Gary, is that something you'd like to comment on, please?
Yeah, as much as possible, I try to have the organisation avoid what I call goal displacing behaviours, so that I would rather spend time and get the right person for the role than employ someone in order to meet a performance measure. So we do work as expeditiously as we can to get these roles appointed, but I've frequently asked HR to go back to the market and get a better person for the role than the best candidate that's been presented. And under the current set of circumstances, that environment's actually improving. The suite of candidates we're getting for roles is actually improving at the moment.
Great. So I think the high is saying that we are subject to market forces. It doesn't mean to say that we recruit anybody willy-nilly, that actually there will be indeed careful thought as to whether we have got the right person, but it remains with us as a high risk. Okay, I'll move on from there. Jim?
Look, Bruce, I agree with that point, and I think it's probably comes up in a few others as well. The dollars limit some of these, how much effort we can put into driving some of them down. Look, and I think probably over a 10-year period, this is likely to be that high risk, but I'd certainly take on board Gary's comments at the moment when job security is probably higher on most people's list than the premium salaries. It's probably going to be easier over the next 2 or 3 years to hold on to staff, but hopefully that doesn't carry on past the 3 or 4 years that we're predicting COVID to be around. So, yeah, look, I accept the high risk, but it is exactly that. It's a high risk.
So what that means is that we will be interested to monitor how the trend goes going forward. I think it reflects that we are coming into this review at an area where we have to accept high risk, but we'll be hoping like we can lower it at no cost. Okay, because it's essentially the trade-offs that we're talking about here. Okay, cool. Can we move to the second risk, please, which is the failure to deliver the old capital works program? There's a good old chestnut for us all in the sector. Any comments that you'd like to make on this one, Jenny, quickly, please?
I think it's pretty.
Okay, can we move? I'm sorry, I'm assuming that you're going to say pretty good. Roger, you've got your hand up. Roger?
Yeah, sorry. I was also just going to say that the part of that, the high risk, is that the dependence upon developers and whether developers are going to get the support from banks, etc. And again, that's totally outside of our control, isn't it?
Yes. I think that's, and we'll see that when I think we look at some of the risks later on in the PE. So that's interesting. Yes. Claire, did you have your hand up? Oh, no, you didn't. Sorry, I thought you did. Okay, any other comments from around the room?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, in terms of this high risk in this category, and I don't want to complicate it, but it seems that we've just lumped all of our services into one category right the way through, and it appears to me that probably the high risk is the three waters services area, and then the rest is probably nowhere near a high risk. So do we just bundle everything into that same high risk category, or is there an opportunity to actually identify which areas of our organisation are high risk?
Dawn, is that something you might care to comment on by any chance?
We can't hear anything.
She hasn't spoken yet, Claire.
Sorry, technical difficulties. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I think you're right, Jim, is that certainly in our Three Waters area, there is a high level of risk in terms of delivering the services and delivering the capital works program. However, if I think in the transport area, we've got a number of key projects, particularly crossings of the Greenbelt in Cambridge, which again are key enablers of development, but subject to processes that are quite complex. So I think there are facets of complexity and risk and across the program of work that we're delivering. So yeah, I think we could go to a lot of work and sort of disaggregate them, but we may well end up with a similar sort of a profile.
Thank you.
Sorry, through the chair, just a comment from me too. One of the things in here is about reputational damage. So sometimes, it's the discretionary projects that we can't deliver that may result in reputational damage as well. So I agree with Dawn, we could segregate, but fundamentally it's quite complex.
And the reason we're accepting a high level of risk in delivery is what?
I guess there's a level of uncertainty here around COVID, which is playing a big part here, where there's a number of elements and talked about developers, etc., but we're not too sure what's going to happen, so we kind of have to accept that.
I think following on from that as well, I mean, we've got the mitigation in terms of the shovel ready, and I guess at the time of preparation of these, we were possibly still hopeful that we were going to receive some shovel ready money. We've had an indication we may get some for Te Awa, and then the waters reform funding becoming available as well. But I think that was in there as well, is that we've got a huge program ahead of us in terms of our capital works program, and as you say, Peter will be reporting this afternoon on that. But the risk was that further funds would become available that we would have to respond to very quickly.
Okay, so again, this feels a bit like the first one, where the external conditions, forcing us to face and accept a higher level of risk than probably we would want to in terms of delivery, given this is such a key focus for us in any one year. Folk, happy committee members with that being the description of the risk appetite that we are sitting with at the moment? I see nods around the room. Okay, can we move on to 3, please? COVID-19 impact. Again, Jenny, open to you to give us any key thing you would wish to say.
So this is largely around being able to recover from the ongoing impacts, and as well we've got the recovery program, but there's also in the back about resurgence as well. So it covers both aspects of that.
Right. Any thoughts from the committee? Claire?
Yes, thanks, Bruce. I'm really pleased to see this in here, and I like the way it's been dealt with. Just 2 minor points. Firstly, in the key risk drivers on the left-hand side, under the first heading, people, and the last bullet point, just a minor correction. It's the response on staff capacity, I think, the impact of the response on staff capacity, not no staff.
Yep, I think you're right.
And the other, the real thing I wanted to say is that in the key risk indicators, there's nothing about staff stress, okay, like the number of sick days that are being taken, or if you know particular roles that are under pressure, the number of resignations or people on stress leave, like those would be, you know, what I'd call lead indicators or something. And is that going to be part of the suite of risk indicators for this particular risk?
In the draft, it hasn't, but certainly can include it. Just that says something I wanted to point out as well, that these key risk indicators are the first time that we've done this.
Yeah.
So we'll look to evolve these over time and check in terms of how we're going.
I'd like to encourage that, George, if I could. I agree with you, Claire. When we get to your report on the COVID impacts, this would seem to be a very real one for us. I would agree that would be useful, at least a trial. I agree we're in a trial phase here. Any other comments on this one, guys? Again, this is one that we are looking at having to accept a high risk. This is a genuinely, well, firstly, it's a genuinely external matter which we don't control. That does tend to suggest that actually we don't have a lot to do other than in terms of our internal response, as far as that's concerned. So it does probably suggest that then again, we have to take a high risk. Is there any comment on that or that the committee would care to make? There isn't? Okay, let's move on. Oh, sorry, Jim or Gary?
Yeah, just one thing. Critically, this performance indicator relates not just to this organisation, but to the community as a whole.
Yes.
So it's a pretty massive risk. And look, I think the current residual risk, given the resurgence, is probably higher than high. We're told even under the current settings, the economy will be at its worst in March next year. So I do think the residual risk, given the risk to the community, is currently much more than high. I think it's more like extreme.
So this is something which is great. So even since we had our meeting a month ago with the workshop, I mean, your point, your advice, Gary, is that indeed it's actually probably worse than we've got it here. I probably can't say I would disagree. It does look like life is going to get harder before it gets better.
Can I come in?
Okay, Roger.
Could I come in, Mr. Chair?
You go for Roger.
Yeah, just one of the things that I think in this particular area of risk is the impact of this on the governance environment. And I think that this continuation of the combined Zoom and face-to-face is actually, to a degree, negatively impacting the governance environment for council. Can you see what I'm getting at? I don't think we get the same kind of debate or interrelativity between councillors and staff that we had prior to COVID. And I think this is a factor that somehow we need to acknowledge and address.
Thank you, Roger. As a traveller, I agree. I agree entirely that actually being here, there is no substitute, without wanting to in any way suggest that you folks should be in the room. It is a different nature. You can have the debate on the Zoom, but you can't have the debate on the margins or the rest that goes with that. Okay, any other comments that people would like to raise? Yes, George, I think you got your hand there, or are you waiting for the next one? No? Okay.
No, I was just asking, are we being instructed to increase the residual risk to very high and keep the target risk at high? Just wanting some clarity on that.
Well, I would tend to say that the prospective current residual risk is, well, I suppose that's oxymoronic, isn't it? Yeah, I think, I'm tempted to agree with Gary that we accept that the risk is certainly higher than high. Whether that's very high or extreme, we can debate about, but it's externally driven.
So I guess we need to go back to the matrix in terms of the risk and likelihood and consequence, and see where it lands. Yeah, I think I would be gut feeling leaning more to very high rather than extreme. But yeah, but look, let's see where that lands when we look at the matrix.
The matrix is at the end of the document.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Well, do we have a real quick look at that now?
No, I think no. I'm going to leave that to you guys.
Leave it to us.
You tell us the colour.
Cool.
We've agreed in principle that it's got to go
okay.
up. Okay. So
Yeah. Cool.
I'll let you worry about the colour.
Yes, but through the chair, we'll leave the target at high, because yeah, I think we would like to be at high. Yeah.
Well, I think what we're saying is the mitigants do take us to down. They become really important that we see those through, because there's our chance. And Gary's got a really good point. This is a big, broad risk, because we're dealing with the community as well as also internally with the council. So it's a combination of both. Okay, can we move on to number 4 then, please? Which is risk.
Excuse me, Bruce.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd just like to respond to what Roger's raised about the difficulty that councillors have in carrying out that more in-depth debate in a Zoom or a hybrid Zoom environment, because I do agree with that. And I mean, you've acknowledged it, but is there something that we could be doing that might alleviate some of those, I suppose, confounding factors? I'm not sure how long we'll need to proceed, with Zooms and things like that, but I agree it's definitely a factor, and I've noticed it myself.
I think the nature of Zoom is generally dictated by the level of lockdown we're in. And I know this is, we have a choice in terms of today's meeting. So I'm not trying to hark back on today's meeting. Perhaps what that does suggest is when we can, we try and do meet. But it's going to be dictated by the lockdown level we're actually in. So I think it's actually not so much a risk as actually an issue. It's reality for us, Claire, that we have to deal with that. And while we have a dominance of Zoom, and can I, by the way, again, the risk of making it appear that I'm having a crack at people that aren't in the room, probably half my meetings at the moment are by Zoom. Because of the lockdown situation. I've got Auckland tomorrow and we're doing it entirely by Zoom, which again is not good actually, but it reflects the, because you've got about 30 people, no, you've got about 50 people in the room for an Auckland one, believe it or not. It's so difficult. It's difficult to have debate other than each member only having one say. So we're doing pretty good today. But let's monitor the effect. I mean, all I'd say here is how many have we had to deal with by Zoom in a year versus in meeting.
It's just that, Bruce, I mean, I'm quite happy about what you're suggesting, but just to Roger though, like we might look at something that the councillors could do online, like have a I think we did send up a messenger group or something and look at ways that we might carry on our debate or deliberations or bouncing ideas off each other in another forum that at least might compensate for some of this. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be very pleased to see when we get the whole of the council around, just to ask them the question if they all feel that there's a challenge there, and perhaps get some discussion as to what can be done to enhance the Zoom environment to enable better debate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, well, I think we take the one on advice, Gary.
So, Mr. Chair, look, I think that's a good discussion. A real issue I had as we debated the long-term plan and the capital works program was that I came away from that debate feeling quite despondent that there seemed to be a level of trust that we needed to build between the executive team and the council. Everyone's been very busy trying to pull things together, and we've lost a vital communication link. So yes, I think if you can leave that one with me, what I'd like to do is set up a regular briefing session between exec and councillors so that you can grill us about the sorts of issues that are concerning you, and we can come up with what I hope are appropriate responses. So I do have an idea in the back of my mind that I want to set up a regular forum between councillors and the executive team so that we can deal with any issues that are front of mind. And if you want exec to back out and leave councillors to talk at the end of that, then that would be fine too.
Great. Look, I'm comfortable then. Claire and Roger, your message has been heard, and I'm comfortable that as a committee we leave it with you, Gary, to take that to the next stage. Ken, you could.
Yes. Yeah. So look, all I was going to say is that I think this discussion on this risk has been very useful. And I think there's about 3 areas that we will blend into this into the final document, probably in terms of impact. So I think the things that were raised were staff stress, impact on governance, and the community aspects of the COVID-19 impact. So if we could blend that into, like I say, perhaps into the impact part of the document. Thank you.
And thank you for the good summary, Ken. Can we move to top risk 4, please, which is risks to information management? Jenny, again, if you want to lead us off with any comments.
I guess this has been an area that is increasing in risk overall across the world, particularly with remote working. But as you'll see in the quarterly report, we are actually doing more to mitigate this risk, but it continues, and it is one of the risks that is a very real risk, as we've seen with the New Zealand Stock Exchange.
So the critical risk we are managing here is unwanted or external intervention into our systems, correct? If we could remove that, we're pretty happy with where we're at from an internal objective and priority setting perspective. The key issue that I read when I read this is that we are concerned about cyber risk attack. Right?
Correct.
Cool. Okay, good. And notice that the risk appetite is the first of the ones where we aren't happy with the current residual risk. And in fact, we're not even happy with the targeted residual risk because we'd like it to be low. But we're reflecting here that again in the realities of the cyber world, we have to accept that there is a moderate level of risk that we will be subject to actually a successful attack. Yes, Claire.
Yeah, and I'm agree completely with your comments, Bruce, and what staff have put together. Again, looking at the key risk indicators in box number 8, I understand those are internal ones, and I would have thought it'd be good to have some sort of external intel on attacks and other trends for New Zealand. I mean, Jenny mentioned the New Zealand Stock Exchange. Like we heard about that in the media. It wasn't something that council picked up from their internal systems, and I do think it's useful to have our finger on the pulse, on what's happening to other people in New Zealand. So whether or not there could be some, you probably actually are receiving some sort of news feed relating to cyber attacks across New Zealand or around the world. I'd imagine, and so you could just add it in that's one of the things you take into account.
Through the chair, the trends, the KRI, the trends and security risks, that's both internal and external. That's the new quarterly report we're getting from our security supplier. So it is looking at what's happening externally as well as internally.
Oh, that's good. Well, perhaps it just could give it that notation in there so that it's clear that it is external as well as internal. But yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Could somebody say internal and external trends? Yes, Roger?
Yes, thanks. Bruce. I think one of the other things as well where COVID is having an impact is on the introduction of new technology amongst the team. For instance, we've had this move towards Teams as a software to utilize, but the delay in bringing that out and having it all of the councillors actually getting the training and the participation in that software has kind of been affected also by COVID. So I think that's something where there is an internal impact, an external impact of COVID on our internal participation in IT systems.
I noticed that somewhere down you are moving to Teams. So yes, but I hear you saying there's the hiccup in trying to get it implemented. Is that correct?
There have been some delays due to COVID with not just Teams, but other technology changes as well.
Yeah. So there is an impact on effectiveness of the council as such. That's not a cybersecurity issue. That's a more related back to the prior item, which is the COVID-19 impact on the council. Yeah.
Suppliers, etc.
Yeah, suppliers. Yep. So I think I didn't hear anybody sort of suggesting that that risk setting was wrong in terms of appetite. We're going to live with a moderate sense of risk, recognising that that's given where we're at with this world. Changes in central government policy and legislation. Again, Jenny, open to you for any quick comments.
We have pulled the three waters out as a separate risk. This is more about RMA planning changes and all the other changes that are coming along out of the government.
Cool. Can I ask Gary why we're accepting a high risk? Can you explain it for me, please?
Chairman, have you ever tried to run a three waters debate with this council?
I wouldn't have a clue how to run it successfully, that is.
There's another issue around the whole RMA space and the drive for efficiency by elevating the planning function to a regional council to do spatial planning and a reduction in equity. And so that translates into the inability of local councils to influence plans for its neighbourhoods and communities. So, look, I think there's a real risk in, throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the RMA and embarking on a new planning tool. And something that we're really going to have to bring our A game to the table on, especially as these RMA reforms roll out and also in respect of the waters debate, there's this tension between do we work to maximise the advantages for ratepayers through a new arrangement, which is, I suspect, where the government wants us to be, and the tension between that and predominantly rural provincial councils saying, well, we really don't want a bar of this reform. So there's still that underlying question to answer, and the executive is in a really delicate position here, where it's being invited to the table to talk about structuring an entity to benefit our ratepayers, when I don't think the council is at that position yet. So there are political risks, and it's all unfolding at a time when we're trying to prepare an LTP. So we'll be landing an LTP with this council in March next year, when we should be receiving signals from the government about what's going to happen in the three water space. And that could alter depending on what the outcome of the election result is.
Yes.
So there are just a whole bunch of external factors going on here that are completely out of our control. And it's a really risky environment to be working in if you're on the exec team and trying to get bits of work positioned in your mind so that you then get the level of engagement right that aligns with your council's needs and desires, which is at odds with where central government is headed.
Yes. Thank you, Gary, because that also covers off risk 12 in the sense of that being the three waters reform. I hear your point. Okay, so can we just, sorry, I was wanting to note those points because I think they're really good. But if I was to, again, focus in on the issue of, we'll find it again, reform, we're talking here about essentially non-three waters reform, but that doesn't really take us away from what you said, Gary, about the problems that we're facing in the RMA regulatory area. So again, looking at that risk, we're having to accept a high level of risk, given again the strong externalities around this, correct? Our approach will be that we are going to look it in the face and we're going to, according to the mitigations, beef up our abilities in the form of a principal policy advisor. But that still means that we have to tolerate high risk given the external conditions that we face. Have I got that correct, Gary?
Yes, too, but also remember, sorry, I didn't make the point at the start of when I started to talk, but there's real tension here between what the shape of local government will be and the sorts of things this council is trying to achieve. So that to a large extent, we plan our towns by our capital works program when it comes to investment in three waters infrastructure. And so the government at the same time that's looking to reform three waters is also looking to reform our planning tools. And when I said we need to bring our A game to the table, we really need to have our head across both of those spaces at the same time.
Yes, fair point, because of even the good link between, as you say, planning and three waters as such. Yeah. It's the perfect storm. Okay. So look, is there any other comment? Thank you for that. That's very helpful, Gary. Is there any other comments folk would like to make, particularly around risk here? No? So if I can summarise it, I go back to that point. This is another one yet where the externalities mean that we have to accept, rather than determine ourselves, the level of risk that we can take on this one. Right? Okay, cool. Let's keep moving on to 6. Conscious of my time. Relationship with key stakeholders. This is one where we have a current high risk, but it's one that we want to improve. We are not satisfied with where we're at. Jenny, anything that you would like to say at this point?
We've got, the next one is iwi. They're very closely related,
yes,
obviously, and we are reliant on other stakeholders to deliver our objectives. So it is a very key risk.
Okay, so that's a really good point. So to take both without wanting to dismiss one or the other, they are both in that same situation where they currently have a high risk and we're wanting to move them to medium. Are we comfortable that the planned actions do that? Yes, Claire?
Thanks, Bruce. I think that some good thought's been put into the mitigations. So I'm comfortable. It's just a few minor points. The first one was that in the box 7 about mitigations and controls, it mentions the Te Arawai Governance Committee. I vaguely recall that actually is now being dissolved or certainly scaled down. So I don't know if it's going to be performing any mitigations that might have been planned, because basically we've put that project pretty much on hold for a few years, haven't we? So I'm not sure if that's still relevant. And I would like some clarity around the difference between under the mitigation, significant mitigations. The top one is council develops a tangata whenua and council partnership model. So what's the difference between that and further down, an iwi engagement strategy. So obviously there is definitely a difference, but it'd be good to understand what the difference is.
Thanks, Claire. Two very good points. Can I ask somebody to provide us with an update? Nice. Break look your way, Gary, sorry. Or Ken.
So first point, first TROI governance model, that committee is in abeyance until funding becomes available. So it's still sitting there, but it will be ramped up as soon as funding becomes available. And we don't know what the future holds in terms of provincial growth funds or that sort of thing. Although we have had some very useful discussions in the last week with the chair of Te Waka, and indicated, the one big thing that they could get across the line for us in terms of, what does success look like for Te Waka? It's leveraging provincial growth fund money. Often, Claire, I think about tangata whenua relationships on two levels. One is the trust boards where we have treaty obligations and very high level, quite formal type presentations. And the other is engagement at hapu level, which is more in the ngā iwi tōpua waipa space. And that tends to be where most of the useful work for us gets done, especially when you start to develop district plans and when you think about the strategy we've got for the next LTP, that is to build, spatial planning, that sort of stuff. So I must say, when I'd read this initially, I was thinking at those two levels, but we could certainly make that a lot clearer.
Yes, thank you for that.
Could I just respond to that, Bruce? Yeah, I'm really happy with your explanation, Gary. I guess I'm involved in a new project that will become a partnership model, I think, with tangata whenua that might fit that top mitigation that isn't necessarily at a trust board level. And it's something I haven't had a chance to talk to you about yet. But it's also actually, I think, a significant improvement on the way that tangata whenua or mana whenua can actually work with council. It's coming out of the COVID recovery packages and things that are available there. It's the ecological corridor that I've talked to you previously about, but things are moving along pretty quickly actually. Yeah, so that's why I was thinking about the difference between those two descriptions. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's complex, all the different iwi groups and how they relate to council and that. So, but, we're wanting to try and get this right and improve our relationships with a broad range of stakeholders actually. So that's how it's come into this, this particular risk page. I'll just go on to another point now, Bruce, which is the key risk indicator. And it seems like we're relying on the resident survey, but I actually feel that that's a lag indicator. And I'm sure that senior staff, Gary, if there was any incident that indicated that the relationship was not as it should be with one of our key stakeholders, actually be resolved immediately without delay, it would be a priority and not waiting for a year for it to show up in a resident survey. And if that is the case, which I'm sure it is, I actually think it should be down as, I suppose, the trend is one of the measures of how quickly a response was made to a stakeholder that was important and council needed to address it.
Thank you, Claire. I first want to agree actually with both the points. I suspect, Gary, that I think you've got obviously a conversation with Gary later, which is more about how the mitigant actually works out. But I take the point, Gary, about the distinction between the partnership model and the strategy. It seems like we have a need for both, and you've got some stuff to input for that, Claire. Here I agree with you. It was my key point reading both these, which is actually as the resident survey, the place we would be where we would find out about our stakeholders. It may be an input, but it seemed like if you're dealing with iwi government, whoever else you might see as key stakeholders, it seemed to be undercooking the process. So again, I think as we work on, I wonder whether there is something that is more sensitive to actually understanding where we're at with our key stakeholders. Okay, I don't know what that is. I've got no brainwave here. Sorry, George, but
So we can take that away and have further discussion.
Really on the back of Claire's good suggestion. I'm asking you to think about that. I think that makes sense. Yes, Gary?
Yeah, so two things for us to do arising out of that. One is to separate that trust board treaty obligation relationship versus the stuff that's going on the ground at local hapu level. So if you can separate those. Good point around not having a lag indicator. You know, a classic example this week was the relationship with St. Peter's School that had been hard for one reason or another. And we moved very quickly to resolve that. So, and I think Gary and maybe even Jim. So we'll need to find something other than a lag indicator for that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And look, and it might be, as Claire said, even if it's a quarterly report on trends rather than anything else, at least because it's closer to the event. But I hear that. That's tremendous. So again, this is one where we need to be comfortable, and I think we are, from what I'm hearing, that actually this is more serious than just leaving it high. And we hope, well, our aim is those actions there enable us to lower the level of risk, because that's our appetite, is at best moderate. Okay, can we keep moving to, I'm going to treat it that we've got number 7 done as well too, please, which is iwi. Can I move to number 8, which is risk to financial sustainability, where again, we want to move it down to medium. Jenny, is there anything that you need to add here at this stage, please?
I think this also reflects the impact of COVID and the uncertainty.
And what does it mean to accept the medium level of risk in this area?
Level of risk.
Can I tell you what I think it means? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. You go for it.
That'll give you a chance to react.
Yes.
I was interested to think, and I hate to say because it's probably me being the accountant. What does it mean to have a medium level of risk? It means actually, presumably, that we are going to push forward where we can, with some level of risk fiscally or financially. It also means that presumably we're wanting to preserve our balance sheet to be able to give us any suspension in terms of risk. In other words, use our debt to the extent that we've got debt available, or perhaps use of reserves. So we're prepared to take a level of risk, which means that we might have to use some of our, in quotation marks, fat, close quotation marks, so that we can move forward. We are not going to get everything down to the nth degree to reduce the risk lower.
Yes. Yep.
Do you like that idea? I mean, you totally tell me I've got it wrong, Ken, but I'm just interested that we get a sense about what the setting is here, please.
Yeah, no, look, I think through the chair, I think those comments are very valid, but I think also equally valid, with that medium level of risk to me suggests that we may just have to be nimble going forward as well, in terms of yes, we may have something in an LTP or an annual plan that we're very much very much looking to achieve, that if financial circumstances, or certainly unexpected financial circumstances dictate, look, we may just have to be nimble and potentially change path, delay, etc. I think with a medium level of risk, there is a greater likelihood of that. But other than that, extension, I would certainly support your comments, Chair.
Great. Any other? Yes, Gary.
Yeah. So you've got to be really careful with this risk, because the lower level of financial risk you accept, the higher the risk to the other parts of the business. So at the moment, I have engineers with asset management plans, activity management plans, suggesting a far higher level of capital spend than this organisation can sustain with its current revenue settings. So that they would say to me is a significant risk to the asset management part of the business. So in having a medium level of risk here means that we continue this paradigm of local government being a relatively low cost, high risk business.
Thank you, Gary. I'm achieving what I want to achieve, which is stirring us up. What does medium mean? So thank you, Jim.
It was just a comment that, and Gary's picked up on most of it, in terms of that medium would indicate to me that we need some freeboard, for argument's sake, in our debt levels in case something goes wrong and we need some more to be able to borrow some more funds. And yet our 10-year plan showing us nudging those limits as hard as we can go realistically. So have we actually got a medium, or have we got a target of a medium risk? And I would suggest probably not, because of the position we're in at the moment with the capital works programs that we've got. Going to Gary's point, so yeah, medium is what level of freeboard we need to build in, and at the moment there's very little.
That makes the second, but again, if I got this right, really important. Well, actually, they're all important, isn't it? But the long-term plan is what I wanted to focus on. How do we, in our LTP, live with this medium level of risk? So, well, Gary, I absolutely take on your point. If you want to crank it down and be so financially certain, you end up doing nothing, because that's the most certain position to be in. But equally, how do you enable things to happen, but recognise that you will have to change things along the way? There's nothing more certain. Yes, Claire.
Thanks, Bruce. I'd just like to make two comments, and I accept that they might not be well received. The first one is that from an analytical point of view, one of the contributors to financial sustainability risk is that council doesn't have an independent, I suppose, source of revenue like an enterprise that they've started, and they'll get dividends or some kind of revenue from it, because this council's always just seen themselves as able to raise all the money they need from either rates or fees and charges. Perhaps it's time to consider what business they could start up, or in conjunction with other councils, so that they might have an independent revenue stream. The second point is that could there be a mitigant to the constraints we have on debt by looking at the way our rating agency assesses us? So doing some work with them to understand more deeply how they arrive at their credit rating in a way that we could reclassify our debt and things like that, just so that it might actually give us more ability, to give us that freeboard to actually increase the amount that we could be borrowing. Now, I haven't talked to Ken about that. I don't know if he's considered something like that. Just of my experience.
These are knocking at the moment here, I think, Claire.
It's just that in my experience with the finance sector, I used to work for the ANZ Bank at the head office, and there were formulas that were used and things like that, and sort of accepted ways of doing things. But when you get a point like this, and it's time to actually have a harder look at how things actually work, sometimes, just asking the question, or even wanting to have a deeper discussion with the rating agency, might actually change things for a lot of councils, not just us. That's all.
So through the chair, certainly in regard to that second point, look, it's actually pretty difficult to work closely with a rating agency. All of these rating agencies, have pretty rigid sets of rules. They all have international committees, etc. Who, whether it's Moody's, Standard & Poor's, or Fitch, they all have a very similar sort of culture. They have the international committees who actually determine those ratings, and a very, very, very strong focus on independence. So really difficult to work directly with them. However, obviously the friend we do have on our side, who does have quite a lot of insight into the way the rating agencies work, etc., is Bancorp. So we have, in relation to what we're currently working through with the LTP, in terms of that, yeah, that debt to revenue ratio, etc., and what might be the impact on our credit rating. Yes, so look, we are, yeah, certainly having conversations with Earl White of Bancorp in regard to that, and yeah, just trying to see, yeah, what the factors are that those rating agencies would be looking at quite closely. But yeah, just reiterating, so, you can't really cozy up with a rating agency. By nature, they are very independent, and they have to be, because because of course what they are looking to do is to give the investors confidence in terms of the financial stability and structure of the of the relevant lending party.
Right. Any final comments on that? Thank you for that, Claire. That's very helpful input. Andrew?
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, look, minimising the risk or reducing it to zero here means basically constricting activity to a point where you crystallise the risk in not going anywhere. So, I mean, obviously there has to be some degree of risk. I think medium's reasonably a reasonable level. In response to Claire's first point too about creating an enterprise to drive revenue, I mean, obviously that has its own risk, and I seem to remember one or possibly two council-owned organisations to do with road services going belly up some years ago. At I would imagine a substantial cost to the councils involved. So you've got to weigh all those things up.
Thank you, Andrew. You're quite right. Roger?
Yeah, thank you. To you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the additional mitigations that we've got listed there, at the council committee meeting last week, we talked about SPVs and the opportunity that's there to move some of our debt off our balance sheet, and perhaps making that capacity downstream to have that little cushion in terms of that revenue to debt percentage. Is it possible to have some reference in the mitigators to investigation of those special purpose vehicles?
So through the chair, actually, I believe it is actually already in there. So significant planned additional mitigations. Yeah, Roger, the second line down is through the LTP. The council considers alternative funding arrangements for infrastructure required to facilitate growth. I admit that it does say e.g. targeted rates, but that could easily be expanded to say e.g. target rates and SPVs. Yeah. So so alternative funding arrangements. So we are definitely thinking SPVs as well.
Yeah. So let's just add to the box for clarity, so that we get outside the immediate necessary impost of directly the ratepayer, but actually some genuinely, arguably, not genuinely, arguably alternative ways. Right. Thank you. Can we? I'm just conscious of time. I've met this is really important. So I do intend to keep on going with this, but I'd like to make certain we do speed up. I speed up because I think this is actually really important. I don't want to cut Jenny and George's paper too quickly. So 9 is failure to respond to customer demand. Any comments on this, Jenny or George?
Not really. I guess this is about how our customers want to interact with us. There's considerable investment planned in this area, so that's reflective in the driving down the residual risk level to medium.
Great, I see that. That's thank you for explaining that's significant investment, because yes, we are saying that we're unhappy being at high. Any comment from the committee? Makes sense. I think the absence of comment is that actually it makes a lot of sense. So we'll be keen to see that happen. Failure to embed a health and safety culture. Now this is a challenging one, because we're saying at the moment we're at medium and we're going to drive it to low. Any comments, Jenny or George, before I open it to the committee?
I guess the low is reflective of zero harm. We don't want anything happening to staff, so that's always where we're going to target.
Yeah. Are you comfortable that level of investment there, George, will help deliver that? Rightio. Any comment from the committee on this, please? It's something which is dear to our hearts. We get regular quarterly reports, and that should remain to be the case. Actually, and can I just say from elsewhere around the sector, I've been in a couple of committees where actually we have all had to remind ourselves, actually, this is one of the key values that the council holds, where we just happen to be seeing near misses just being reported. And we started to say, so what are we doing about it? And we realised that we'd taken our eye off the ball. Not here, different council. Okay, can we move to 11, please, which is climate change impacts. Now, this is interesting. So high, which has got a GH at the end of it, not just high. Okay, can we have a comment, George and Jenny, please?
Yeah, so this is a desire to look at this, but over the next year, not a considerable effort or investment in this area. So this is a 12-month window, so that's what those ratings are reflecting.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a key point. Thank you. You've gone exactly what my eye went to. This is I've called it a holding pattern. You might not like that word, for the next 12 months. Are there any comments from the committee? Yes, Claire?
Sorry, it took me a while to unmute. Look, I'm really happy with what's being suggested. I just queried that with the climate change things. My understanding is that the flooding issue is the biggie for Waipa, and I just thought that would have been mentioned.
Is there a project, a program, or something that we're doing with around flooding? Okay, so that would be a mitigation.
And in fact, we're just about to release our flood viewfinder, I think we call it, Ken, where we indicate where the 50-year and 100-year flood levels are.
Yeah.
The big issue for us when we're trying to construct the LTP was when was it affordable to start putting flood mitigation measures, projected flood mitigation into the LTP, and really there just wasn't the headroom within the next 2 years anyway to do that. Now, given that climate change is a long-term issue in terms of the flood levels we're modelling at the moment, we felt that it was, of all the things that you could slide out in the 3 water space, it was the climate change issues that we could slide out to year 3. I think we're coming in with mitigation measures for climate change.
And the important thing I note here is that you have some mitigants, which, well, the carbon monitoring program, you are starting to gather data. Well, in addition to already existing data, I presume.
Yes, we're attacking this on 2 levels. One is we're doing the monitoring through LAS. There's a monitoring tool that's become available, and secondly, there is work that we're doing with ECA to reduce our energy consumption. So we're looking at reducing the carbon footprint, but at the same time we're measuring that.
Okay, thank you for that. Welcome, Leon. See your smiling face there, mate. We're an item behind, so you may want to get yourself a cup of tea while you wait, Cobber. But
no, that's all right. Thank you, Bruce. We've been attending since the start. I was going to ask a question now, but Gary just answered it. So
okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
Rightio. So there seems to be a consensus that we are in a position we're at. We're having to accept high risk at this stage. Perhaps we have a sense about the real risk. But at this stage, we're going to live with it. Okay, sweet. Can I go to 12, Three Waters Reform? We've had already had a reasonable discussion with Gary on that. Is there any other additional comment that people would like to make? We're going to have to grapple with this in this coming year. There is no 2 ways about it, and it's going to be forced upon us. It becomes a question of tactics, but that's for a different meeting.
And the only other issue I'd talk about is that through the Society of Local Government Managers, there are a significant number of councils that have come together across the Waikato Bay of Plenty who will be working in the background. I think the cost is $25K per council, which we use our regional allocation of money from the Crown towards, to look at everything that came out of reports like Cranley
Yeah.
to talk about ways in which we can influence decision making of whatever entity is set up to handle capital investment and growth and those sorts of things. So that work is going on in the background, and we'll be bringing a report back to you prior to Christmas on that.
That's music to my ears. If I can say that, Gary. I mean, my advice is yes, get proactive. Don't wait for the process outlined by the Crown. I mean, they probably already have their decisions made. I shouldn't say that publicly, but I'm sure they have. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. So if we could move to the last risk.
Chair, Claire had her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Claire.
No,
Thank you.
that's all right. I'd just like to say that I think one of the risks should be, what does the community want? I've been following a little bit what's been happening over in the Hawke's Bay, and a lot of work being done over there, Napier and Hastings, but it's coming undone because they're getting feedback that the community doesn't want to like cross-subsidise. You know, like, I think it's really important that in the assessment of the risk, we also have to be aware of what our community wants.
Yes, that's probably a fair point. You're the authorising environment. And I do take your point that the Hawke's Bay is grinding a wee bit. One other minor point, advocacy with peer councils, active participation by staff. Are there avenues for elected members to be sponsors of this work? Gary, I just wondered why we shouldn't have staff and elected members.
Yes, look, we need to take our elected members with us, hence the, the report that's being commissioned. But currently we have a 3 waters masters plan that's been prepared by Becca and WSP Opus, looking at optimal levels of capital investment in our 3 waters infrastructure. And it's a significant amount of capital required to drive that. So one of the things we intend to bring back to a council workshop tomorrow is a suggestion that look, I'm not happy with the level of risk we've landed on in the LTP. And what I was going to suggest to the council tomorrow is that we have the master plan and that we need to be consulting about this with governance, iwi, the community, as to the level of capital required and the level of risk they're prepared to absorb. On the back of that, we can also stitch in so here is what the Crown's suggesting, and interested to obtain community feedback, so that when it comes to the March announcement by the Crown, we then positioned ourselves so that we can then start to communicate with our community and feed that into the next round of discussions with the Crown.
Thank you, Gary, for that advice. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, can we move on to the final risk, which is number 13, failure to prioritise and develop projects that meet community expectations? Comments, Jenny and George?
No, not really. I guess this links back to the financial sustainability top risks. There's tension over what projects can actually be done. So this is really what that risk is reflecting in terms of discretionary versus non-discretionary spend.
Any comments from the committee? Can I just ask, from a mitigant perspective, what's the strength of our communication with the community around this?
Gary, do you want to comment on that?
Pass.
Yeah, we've got a really good communications team here. The other mitigant, it's strange, isn't it? Like, we're sitting on $1.7 billion worth of assets, and we really have to maintain those. And with the significant drop in revenue, the big push in the water spend, the growth we're facing, there's very little capacity to deliver these projects that are near and dear to our community's heart. So we consult on some magnificent projects that are relatively low capital cost, and then we go back and say, well, actually, we can't afford them. So, and there's a massive risk to the council's reputation in doing that. So what I hope to do tomorrow with the council is to bring back a range of opportunities for us to think about. And if money becomes available through those opportunities, then let's prioritise these community projects and start to deliver them. So I absolutely accept that there's a huge risk to the council in failing to deliver these high-profile community projects that are relative relatively low capital cost in the big scheme of things. So, you know, with the capital works program around between $80 and $100 million a year, there must be some scope within which we can find some money, and that's what I'll be talking to the council tomorrow about.
Yeah. So look, the reason I raised the comms is not, I don't doubt the effectiveness of the team here, but I don't think you either mean it, Gary, that it's just limited consultation, but actually how do we put out this contention that you've mentioned, Jenny, and keep that in front of the community's mind, that actually it isn't a free-for-all, and the challenges that go with that. So I'll leave that as a question mark. Okay, are there any comments then on it? It does suggest that we have to hold a high risk, which may seem somewhat high, but in terms of delivery, that's probably not unreasonable.
Bruce, I've got some comments, sorry. Yeah.
Go for Claire, don't apologise, it's good.
I absolutely agree with Gary. I've just been through a consultation with the Pirongia Village Town Concept Refresh. The community identified some great projects to do, and we've been told that nothing will happen for 3 or 4 years. They're pretty disappointed, and they're not large scale projects. It's because there just isn't any leeway for them to be progressed the way our finances are at the moment. So I do think it's a big risk, and I'm all ears that Gary's got some sort of plan for us to consider, because I had some pretty disappointed people at our last meeting, I can tell you.
Thank you, Claire. That characterises the risk even more, so thank you for that. Rightio, if we can just move on, is there anything, we've had a fair crack, and I'm sorry that I've probably plagued with A, people's time, and B, your presentation, Jenny. Is there anything, if we move to the risk appetite statements, you'd like to raise?
Main thing is to remember this is by portfolio rather than specific risk. So as wider, we have made the appetite levels congruent with the top risk levels, and there's a table in the report that summarises the changes in appetite from last year based on the discussions. So it might be better to look at the table.
Oh, you better, so that's, just remind me what page that's on, the actual table.
Page 20 of the agenda.
20?
2021 of the agenda.
20? Okay, got it here. Sorry, my mistake. Yes, so the bottom of page 20, top of page 21. Sorry, I didn't realise how many pages we're going through. Okay, if I can just have any quick comment from the committee. Take the point, Jenny, that this is looking at it from a broader portfolio perspective rather than the specifics, but there is an alignment, and it did look as if, and I went to the dials again, being picture-centric in my life, I got it, so that made some sense. Colleagues, is there a comment you'd like to make for these as a general statement around these portfolios of the risk that we're prepared to tolerate?
Bruce, I'd just like to say I'm really happy with the statements. I think it captures pretty well what's reflected in that risk analysis that we've just gone through, actually.
It is. It's important perhaps reflect on the table. Thank you, Jenny and George, for putting us to it, where you see that we have made changes. So, for instance, people and culture, we discussed that we've gone from a moderate appetite to a high appetite. Bearing in mind, was probably driven by the realities of the market we're in at the moment. Okay, I'll take that as being that there are no other comments. Jenny, George, is anything else with the rest of the paper that we need to consider at this stage, please? Thank you. Can I move to the recommendations then, please, which are on page 19 and 20. There are actually 3 that are important. We received the report. We endorse the top risks. Look, there are the odd bits of change with that, but I don't think we need to worry too much about it. We are essentially endorsing those. And thirdly, that we endorse the risk appetite statements. Okay, if I got somebody to be prepared to move those motions, please. Thank you,
Oh,
Jim.
sorry.
Andrew, I'll take it that you second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Can I please put it then that I move these three motions? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
against?
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Obviously, as always, it's not like we're setting these in gold and in concrete. They're going to be reviewed every quarter. So thank you for a very good report, George and Jenny. Appreciate the work that you've done there. And we needed to take the time, I argue we needed to take the time that we had. Can we move then, please, to the compliance strategy and the compliance management policy, please?
So the compliance management policy is a foundation document and will underpin the improvement program we're now getting underway. And this builds on the audit that KPMG have completed last year.
Yeah.
They have reviewed both the policy and the strategy with a best practice lens, and any suggestions have been put in. They were quite comfortable with them, and they've also given some information to us to include into the guidance materials that'll get written. And it's also, this policy is aligned with that of other councils and public entities, particularly the Office of the Privacy Commissioner.
Thank you, Jenny. I think this is a really important suite of policy and strategy. Is there comments from the committee or questions or clarification of Jenny or George? I said this is the hard stuff, isn't it? It's compliance. It's actually what we're about in parts. So I know it's tough, but can I just, for the benefit? Oh, sorry, Jenny. Somebody's got their hand up. Claire?
Yeah, thanks. It's great to see the framework, and I think some really good work's been done there. It occurred to me that all councils have faced the same compliance challenges. And is there any plan to collaborate across LAS or something to get this framework set up, hopefully using some software or something that will actually make it really easy to have eyes across the compliance requirements, so that like we want to make it as easy as possible, but absolutely watertight.
There are actually discussions going on at LAS at the moment around potential software solutions. We're actually gathering requirements, business requirements, rather than just accepting a package, so that we know that it'll be fit for purpose.
I'd like to draw members' attentions to the plan implementation table on page 99. And you should know by now, it's in diagrams, I like it. This is a really helpful insight into actually the program that's being done. The other thing that I'd just like to draw members' attention to is under the policy actually is 6.3. Which is implications of council non-compliance included. It's got a list of about 7 or 8 bullet points there. And I think this is reasonably important because one of the interesting things that you said in the strategy and the policy is a proportionate response, which seems like we're doing something different than 100% compliance, which is probably a shackle too hard. So we're saying here that we are going to do this risk-based and on a proportionate basis. And it struck me that 6.3, particularly A, was really important in getting a sense, I presume, as to how matters of compliance guide your proportionate response. Can I just have a comment from you, George or Jenny, on that? Does that make sense? Have I got it right?
Yeah, absolutely you have. So we're taking a risk-based approach. We need to lift the maturity of compliance. So we're going to be focusing on areas that are higher risk to council, and that can be put through the lens of what the consequence is according to those points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to reflect that for the members, if I can give you a quick sense as I read this seemed to me to be really important. We want to avoid these. Therefore, our attention and focus from a risk perspective should be to the compliance matters that give rise to those as consequences.
Yep.
Are there any other comments from members at the stage? I sense there isn't. So I will test this and send on the most of the talking. I think I'll move the motion, and we do have indeed two barrels here. One is to receive. The second is that we endorse this, and this is, I think, effectively a management policy. We are endorsing that the executive team adopts this. Correct? Got that right? Thank you. So I'd like to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Claire. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. Right, interim management report. You still there, Leon, or have you run away?
We've got one more, sorry, Bruce. Sorry.
Nearly there, sorry.
Yeah.
Go back another cup of tea, buddy. It's, sorry, thank you, crisis management plan. Oh, this is really, these are all good papers. I could spend hours on this. Let's go for it. George?
Again, taken as read, I think the big lesson is rather than testing it on an exercise, we tested it live with COVID and have streamlined it and updated it. And really it's aligned with what other councils are doing. And we've learned a lot from COVID, and it'll continue to evolve and improve. And I think the effective working of a crisis management team, some of whom were exec people like Ken and Dawn, but working closely with exec was very effective.
Thank you, Jenny. Claire?
I'd just like to say congratulations. I thought it was an excellent document. It's been really well thought out, and I love the hyperlinks and all that take people straight to the resources and things like that. And I'm very happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that before I forget? Thank you, Andrew. Saw your hand up first. Okay, there might be one or two other questions. I do, if it's okay. So the crisis management plan is essentially about response, right? That's what we say on page 131. Is there a sense in the plan that defines when it stands down? This helps me understand when it gets activated. When does it stand down?
So there's a number of criteria, and it's basically in reverse order. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I noted in I think it was the sort of the lessons learned was the ongoing problem through COVID, where, if I understand it correctly, and I'm probably talking to some of the people that are involved, but actually there was need to carry out the day job as well as the CMT role. Does this plan deal with the backfilling issue?
Yes, it does. So you can see there's a number of scenarios in the back. So not all staff are part of a crisis management team. It's very much scenario dependent. And there's also, from a crisis manager perspective, rostering on. We want to upskill as many staff as we can, so we're not reliant on individual people. And when we get into a situation like COVID, where we're still trying to deliver BAU pretty much at the same time, that helps to spread the load. Right,
okay. So that's good. I hear your point. Just because we spread it around, we have different people for different scenarios. Doesn't mean to say that people that are directly involved are free of their day-to-day commitment, but I hear you're saying there's a sensitivity to that.
The other thing to add too is that we go through an alternate approach, so everybody has a partner.
Right.
So if it becomes too much, we spread it between those people as well.
Sweet.
So through the chair, actually, I know due to time constraints, we did skip over the COVID debrief in the previous item.
That was my fault.
And a number, that's right. I mean, we were pressing time, but I was going to say a lot of these issues of resilience and sustainability and particularly staff sustainability to manage the process. They were certainly key learnings out of that debrief report.
Look, my apologies. That does reflect that I did get a bit warped in my time scale. Sorry, that was a very effective report. Colourful, Ken, as I think you put it out to me in my pre-agenda on the COVID debrief. Thank you. It was an insight, and that's one of the reasons I asked that question. Sorry, by the way, was having read the debrief that we dealt with in the policy, particularly, or the plan. Sorry, particularly the backfilling issue. Are there any other comments? And I'm sorry, there might be the COVID response from the previous item. I'm not going to try and reopen the agenda, but are there any other comments from the committee that they'd like to make at this stage, please? Right, so I have a motion that we, again, I think it's double barreled, that we receive it, and secondly, that we endorse ET, adopt it. Moved by Jim, seconded by Claire, if I recall correctly. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, better tick these items off rather than relying on my site. Thank you, George and Jenny. Very, very helpful leads. Can we deal with the interim management report, please? Sarah, welcome. Is there any comment you'd like to make, or will I open it up to good old Leon at the back?
So I guess the main thing, I'll take it as read and let Leon comment on the report itself, but there are obviously 3 new recommendations which are listed there. So the monthly general ledger reconciliations, which was a mistake on our part, and we now do a different process and a reminder system for that. The employee entitlements, so that item was a one-off, so we have no further action from that. And the establishment of the central register for contractors. So that's something we'll need to investigate further. So.
Thank you, Sarah. So broad acceptance, we'll work on them, Leon. This will be a good chance just to invite you to make comment, please, and perhaps also some broader reflections on the coming audit, mate, or the audit process, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll take this in 3 parts. The first part is just to make a comment about the Audit and Risk Committee pack and the agenda pack and the quality of the papers. I think this is some of the best I've seen, and I've seen a few. Then after Kat is going to talk about the interim management report, I'll give you a quick update on the audit. Oh, I like your risk management. Sorry, should have said that.
Thank you, Leon. Good morning, all. I will take that the interim management report has been read. Some of the key highlights that we've picked up was that the internal control environment was effective for our audit purposes, so we're happy with the control environment. As Sarah has mentioned, we did identify 3 areas for improvement. I won't go into those. We also followed up on matters that we raised in previous management reports. There are still 8 matters that continue to remain open. 9 matters will be followed up as part of our final audit that is in process at the moment. And we were also able to close 3 matters that relate to GST, regular patching of end user devices, and guidance for MES expenditure. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kat, and welcome. I didn't, it was only when your picture came on that I realised you were there. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
So thank you very much for your input. Are there any questions on Kat and Leon's report at this stage? Thank you for pointing out that we have an effective control environment. I'm always keen to see that. Comments and questions? No? COVID, Kat, I went to section 3, COVID impact. I think you have, if I take it the graph in the table on page 168 is relevant to us, raises the issue of asset class revaluation cycles with 3 hitting next year. So I'll shut up because I just read actually what I should be reading. Thank you, Ken. It should be 2021, not 2020. I'll ignore that. Are there any other questions? No? Leon, sorry, Claire.
Well, I was just going to get clarification from Leon. The suggestion is made on the following page that the District Council undertakes a formal systematic assessment of the impact of its annual report of COVID-19, especially the financial statements. So I guess that's not just a generic statement, but Leon feels that it's important for staff to do that.
So you go, Leon.
All right.
Okay.
Kat, you want to go?
Yeah, that is a generic statement. To bear in mind, this report was issued a few months ago, so Council has actually performed that assessment and we have been provided with that, and we were happy with what had been disclosed in the assessment.
Okay, thanks very much, Kat.
Is there anything you need to follow up with, or are you okay?
No, I'm fine, Chair.
Brilliant. Comments, Leon, generally about the audit?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, in this current environment, it didn't go as smoothly as we expected. That's no reflection on the management or staff at the council or my team overall. And so we're slightly behind where we wanted to be. We promised you verbal clearance by 11 September, which is last Friday. Now we just received the annual report today. So we're going to try and turn that around by latest Wednesday, which is the next date I promised Ken, but it may slip. Ken, sorry, I haven't been able to update you on this. But then that'll be the end of the week by latest. I think that's the bad news story of this whole thing. Also, Kat just explained the COVID assessment that's been done by council. That was really good. The last bit about COVID that we need to do is look at the annual report and the final annual report and just look at the disclosures. I don't foresee any issues, but it is an outstanding at the moment. In our annual plan or audit plan, we mentioned a few items that we're going to look at. The one was property, plant and equipment. And we specifically mentioned revaluations, and you referred to the table on page 168 of your pack, Mr. Chair, about when revaluations are supposed to happen. So land and buildings did happen this year. It's got a carrying value of about 330 million, and it went up by about 25 million. That was done by QV. That was within our expectations. So we did the work. I told you in a few meetings ago how much extra work we do on it. And in the COVID environment, trust me, we did even more. And we're comfortable with that revaluation. Then you've got infrastructure assets that's only due next year. Now, because of the impact of COVID, we did see quite a bit of movement in commodity prices. So we were quite interested to see what the valuers came up with, because they did fair value assessments as the revaluation was not required. We were comfortable with the fair value assessments. I think it was Becker and WSP and the work done by management. So we're comfortable that the carrying value of about 1.5 billion of infrastructure assets reflect the fair value as well within materiality boundaries. The last revaluation we looked at two more. The other one was investment properties. There was a balance of about 16 million. It moved up by about 260,000. That makes sense as well, especially in a growth council like yourself. And then we looked at the forestry towards where Councillor Clare lives. You've got some forestry assets, and yeah, we were overall comfortable with that as well. That is the whole property, plant and equipment, intangible, biological assets, and the revaluation around that. So overall, we're comfortable with that. Before I move on, are there any questions on that?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, just a clarification. You said the 18th. That's this Friday. You hope to give verbal, or you plan to give verbal clearance.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Yep. Any other questions for Leon at this stage? No? You got some more things to say, Leon?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we also looked at, as Kat mentioned already, Interim management report. We looked at the control environment. It's something we mentioned in our audit plan, so I just have to mention it now. I'm not going to go into detail because it won't impact on your annual report at all. The next item in our audit plan was capital works program. Now, you've explained this so well in your agenda pack under risk management. I think it's the second of your top risks. So I'm not going to go into that because that is really well explained. There was quite a bit of, not quite a bit, there was quite an increase in your work in progress from about 45 million to almost 110 million, which is expected. Again, was no surprise to us. So we just had a look at whatever has been capitalized should be capitalized. It meets the definition of a capital expense, and it's not an operating expense. This is also reflected in your borrowings increase, of course. Lastly, that was in the plan, was the risk of management override. We did our normal tests, and we didn't find any issues of concern. And then we spoke about COVID, and something else I was just thinking about was the SSPs. we're not completely done with that work, but why I bring it up is in this COVID environment, we found quite a few issues at different councils. And up to now, we haven't found anything that causes concern, which I thought I should just mention to you, because if you're on an audit and risk committee of any other council, I presume you might have seen some issues found during the audit with the statement of service performance.
Thank you for that, Leon. That's really helpful. I appreciate you shedding it back home to the matters you said at the start of the audit you would look at carefully. So that all sounds relatively positive, that despite the challenges of getting through, we are still on target in terms of our receiving and adopting of the annual report, correct?
Yeah, that moved actually because in the plan we agreed 15 September, which is tomorrow. Now that's not going to happen. It is going to happen on the 28th. We've got an extraordinary audit and risk, you've got, which we'll attend, and where we'll just finalize the audit discussion. I don't foresee any issues, and I believe on the 29th, Ken, you will be adopting the annual report.
Yes, so through the chair, that's correct. That's definitely the intention, Leon.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got that in our diaries. So the 28th becomes the important date for us, correct? Brilliant. Okay. I'm saying that as much to myself, Ken, as to anybody else. You might guess that one already. Okay, that's really helpful, Leon, again, as I say. And Kat, thank you for that advice. Are there any other further queries for Kat or Leon? There aren't. Would somebody like to move the motion, which is simply that we receive Sarah's report? Thank you, Claire. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jim. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 It's carried. Thank you very much. Again, thank you, Audit New Zealand. Right, let's move to, I'm trying to get us back on track. It's only 10 minutes, not 20. A self-assessment. Well, actually, it's more than a self-assessment. It's actually somebody's looked at us a bit more than just ourselves. So, Ken, are you the lead on this one, please?
Yes, I am indeed. So, yeah, happy to lead you through this report, Chair. Yeah, just looking on page 178, or just noting on page 178, I suppose that yeah, that this is now the sixth survey that we've had. Yeah, very much following the same the same line of questioning, because of course what we're looking to do here is to determine the change over time, longitudinal change and perception over the course of the committee's existence. So having that having that long range in the 6 surveys certainly helps with that. Without further ado, I'll skip over the next 2 or 3 pages and go straight to page 181, where I do just summarise the survey results, which of course are fully contained in Appendix 1. But first thing to note, certainly a very good response rate to the survey. So we ended up with 17 responses, which was good. All 6 committee members responded. Now, I do apologise that I think we did have some issues with the tool, which actually led to a couple of the councillors having to complete the survey on multiple occasions. We have taken account of your perceptions only once, because in fact we did only receive them once. But yeah, look, I'm sorry about the frustration with some of you having to have multiple goes at the survey before those results came through. So in terms of the observations, so I guess the first bullet point there under brief observations on page 181. So definitely when you look at those graphs, and particularly look at the very original baseline survey and where we are today, you can definitely see that there is a good favourable shift with the results or the bulk of those lines on the graph moving towards the right. Also encouraging that I think you can largely say that there's some good positive shifts between last year and this year as well, so of more recent times. Yeah, look, there are a couple of unusual outlier results. So there was, yeah, particularly in that first graph, where a couple of council officers and a non-member councillor, i.e. a councillor who's not part of the committee, yeah, we're quite a way to the left, which was a little bit of a surprise. We'll perhaps take those people into a darkened room and find out. No, I just yes. Yeah, look, I'm not sure what the reasons for that are, but yeah, but I would have hoped that yeah, that if they are true outliers, obviously in the verbatim comments that there could be some suggestions coming through, and indeed there are some suggestions coming through. So I think that's good and that's healthy. Yeah, the next 2 or 3 bullet points I'm on page 182 now are just sort of talking about yeah, the ratings are good, and yeah, they are definitely yeah, definitely a lot of those ratings are at the higher end of the scale. So yeah, so good to see that. And then yeah, I guess just leading then to those verbatim comments, which we do pull through in the appendix. So I guess yeah, 2 key groupings there. So the yeah, the first lot are suggestions. So yeah, there are a number of suggestions there about greater participation of managers in these agendas and in these meetings. Yeah, the impacts of central government policy changes, etc., impacts of COVID-19, cost benefit, risk appetite considerations, etc. So yeah, so a number of areas of focus here. So I guess yeah, when we get into the discussion, yeah, it could be useful to determine if the committee does want to take up some of those suggestions. But yeah, just rounding out my report, yeah, I mean, really encouraging that in those verbatim comments, that there was really good value seen in a number of matters. Yes, like yeah, like definitely the top risk exercise, which of itself has become a really robust annual thing. As we actually saw a little bit earlier in the agenda today, there was a comment there about the KPMG internal audits. So I guess yeah, getting some insights from some outside experts in regard to how we're doing, deep dives, etc. Hearing from subject matter experts. Later on in this agenda, we will be hearing from our insurance brokers, which I guess is an example of that. And yeah, people also talking about the value of the general risk discussions with yeah, with Gary as the CE, and with the yeah, with the group managers on a rostered basis. Yeah, also obviously value in the interactions between governance and management and this committee, which is probably stronger than it is in some of the other yeah, some of the other committees of council. So yeah, so look, I think all up, yeah, all up a very good result. I do think this thing is worth a check-in once a year. I think we are compiling some good information that shows how we're going. So yeah, so through the chair, happy to open up to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you again for carrying this out. It was certainly my keen desire we do that. Are there questions for Ken at this stage, please, or indeed Gary, or comments to raise? Yes, Roger.
Am I loud?
Yes, I can hear you, Roger.
I am. Very good. Just as a new councillor, I'd just like to acknowledge, I think, the benefits and value of this committee, but also the fact that of all of the committees that I've had to attend, this is one that probably takes the longest and largest learning curve of any of them to understand the concepts of public entity risk. So I'd just like to acknowledge that and say I think it's one of the committees that I've probably got more out of in terms of my better understanding the functions of local government. So thank you.
Thank you for
and thanks for your leadership, Bruce.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments people would like to make? Just a couple of questions from me, Ian, if that's okay. Look, I just noticed the point around treasury management. It clearly becomes relevant as we take on more debt. Actually, it's relevant if you've got investments as well, to be asked. Yes. Is this a training need? And I must confess, I'm just wondering, it is, we could characterise it as a matter that should interest us on this committee. Is this, but I'm conscious that actually you are doing your LTP at the moment, for which treasury management practice is a key part. Is there been any thought given as to how we might respond to this request, Ken, in any way? Well, it's not a request, but is there a training need or something that could be done that would help members?
Yes, so through the chair, look, yeah, look, I think that is a very valid observation. Yeah, it definitely did come through in the yeah, there was a number of subject areas that we looked at, and treasury management was the one that yeah, that really was the yeah, the outlier, I suppose, in terms of differing understandings of treasury management. Look, I guess my thinking was yeah, and I guess to be tested here, because we do have 5 councillors on this committee as well as yourself, Bruce. Is yeah, we could I guess we could easily yeah, get Earl White from Bancorp, who is our long-time Treasury advisor. I guess we could get him in for, I guess what could be termed a Treasury 101, if yeah, you know, if certainly if the councillors in the room thought that it had value. Yeah, I mean, you've all heard Earl present, obviously, in regard to our strategy and in regard to what's happening in the market, because we have yeah, we have brought him in on yeah, on yeah, pretty much an annual basis, either to the Finance and Corporate Committee or this one. But if you wanted, I could certainly talk to him about a bit of a 101 type approach. Yeah, you know, Earl is very, very knowledgeable. He's very, very engaging, and yeah, and you know, I think yeah, there could be a value, but obviously only worth it if a few people think it is.
2 hands up, 3 hands up.
Okay.
Okay.
So those hands are in support of a 101 type deal. Yep.
Yeah, through you, Bruce. I think so. I'd actually like to see all the councillors and not just the Audit and Risk Committee as well, because we are, you know, moving into a stage where we will have a lot more debt, and if the councillors that are on the committee, you know, feel that they need to know more, I'm sure that the rest of the councillors might as well. But I'd just like to hopefully, like, we'd need to find out exactly what it was that the feedback was from this survey. You know, like treasury management is a pretty broad subject. I mean, it'd be good to have a bit of an idea of exactly what the issue is.
Yes, so through the chair, I guess 2 things. Yes, and when I was pitching the 101, I was very much thinking about the entire council. Firstly, so yes, we'd look to run it, I suppose, yeah, along with the other LTP workshops we're doing. Yeah, we'd pick it up as an LTP workshop. And yes, yeah, thank you, Claire. I think that's a really good suggestion, that if we were to do something that, yeah, perhaps is a some sort of interaction with councillors first, in terms of particular areas of interest, and we could certainly feed that through to Earl, assuming Earl is happy to do it, which in fact I'm sure he would be. Yeah, so yeah, just to give them some guidance in terms of what topics to cover.
My final point, thank you for that, Ken. My final question, and it's really open to both management and councillors, are again, a very good report. How do we personalise this with the rest of your colleagues? I think it's important that they understand. I mean, we've made a self-assessment. Well, as I say, it's more than a self-assessment because you've gone outside the immediate committee members. Is there a need for this in some way, and the role of the committee to be raised more directly with the rest of your council colleagues? Is it worth the time?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So actually, sorry,
it's an open question. I'll take all comers.
Yes, yeah.
Otherwise, I'll go to lunch.
Actually, sorry, just because I mean, through the chair, that is more properly directed to that question to the councillors rather than myself. But look, just to aid the thinking there. So yeah, so after every audit and risk committee meeting, I do put a report through to full council.
Right.
So obviously I will do that. You know, as an outcome of this meeting. However, perhaps just something to think about. Would it be of value, because yeah, myself and Bruce have talked about this previously, would it be of value for, on occasion, and maybe for this one, that when that report is prepared and when that report is presented through to the meeting, that perhaps on occasion actually Bruce is involved in that presentation of the report as well. Yeah, so yeah, you know, that would but quite possibly in the current environment be by, or for cost efficiency purposes, be by Zoom.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Infamous Zoom.
Yeah.
Feeling, thoughts, guys?
I think that's an
Like,
excellent
Rich?
idea.
Sorry, clear?
I do think that's an excellent idea, because Bruce, you can express things so well, and you know, your manner is such that people will be willing to ask you questions, and you'll be able to handle it really well. Yeah, I just think it add a lot of value.
Thank you. I'm not looking at this from a personal perspective. I am very keen that the council be aware and can genuinely take confidence in the work of the committee in a management of risk sense, or a governance of risk sense, rather than it just being, oh, well, they meet, so we must be okay, which can be the assumption in my experience. Okay, look, I'll leave it then. Oh, sorry, Jim.
And confirm support, really. I think it's imperative that the rest of the council do have a level of comfort, I suppose, that everything is being managed appropriately, and the only way they're going to get that is if they know what's going on. So yeah, look, and Ken's suggestion of you being available either online or in person would be a great help. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, well, look, that's Ken, I hadn't forgotten that you actually write a report after this to council. I'm very glad about that, but we can perhaps take this one offline and see if there is an appropriate venue. So that's tremendous. Again, Ken, thank you for this. I wonder if we could just move to the recommendation, please, which is on page 178, which is that we received Ken's report. Thank you, Roger. You moved.
I'm happy to second.
Appreciate that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Well, at 12:05, Sam, I've got us to lunch. Okay, so you folk, we'll eat your share. And can I invite you back? Can I invite you back, please? Look, you need the half hour at 12:35, if that's okay. Please, I know that's heading into the afternoon, but you've done a good morning's work. Thank you for that time, particularly around the top risks. And we'll see you back at 12:35. I need to, yes. G'day, Claire, how are you? You need to turn your microphone on if you want to speak to me, but I can see you talking.
Sorry about that. Yeah, how are you? Sorry, I was asking so many questions in the meeting. Yeah, I just
we won't go through comparison with each other about what we had for lunch, but thank you to,
I'm sure yours is much nicer than mine.
I don't know, thank you to the Waipa staff for what they provided. It was nice, thank you. It was superb, which is great. And I think we'll just,
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine to be delivered, by the way.
we'll post it to you. We'll post it to you, Roger. And Andrew, are you there, Andrew, or have you not turned your video on? Okay, look, I think we should make a start. I'm conscious that it took us a bit to get through this morning, albeit I hope you found it effective. If not, what did I say at the start, Jim? Exciting. I'm going to test you at the end as to whether this has been an exciting meeting, mate. So you'll have to just keep you going. We want to deal with the excuse me, the long-term plan update. Haven, I take it it's you that's going to rip us through this one, please. That's great.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yeah, the purpose of this report is just the regular quarterly update. It highlights some key issues for potential discussion, discusses the next steps, and highlights the key risks. And of course, this one also appended the full risk register, which was asked at the last quarterly update. Given the pandemic, it was just highlighted to have a full check-in on the risk register. So hoping to take it as read and just open up for any discussion, questions.
Okay, thank you, Haven. They're very important. We already talked about before you came, Haven, as we're going through top risks, some of the challenges around the long-term plans. So this is a really good chance for us to bring those points together. Are there questions, firstly around the report, before we then look at some of the supporting data that people have? Questions for Haven? Right, I got them, Haven, sorry. And you know, I've sort of put my slightly sort of, can I say my slightly sort of cynical hat on here. I just want to check, so you can tell me I'm a cynic and that it's not appropriate. But I'm just conscious that if I look at the 2 bullet points on page 201, we've had to crimp up the development of the financial model with all the results. Understand COVID, blah, blah, blah. And it won't be developed with council until October, November. And then I go down and look at the community engagement, and we had a logical, very good 3-step process, but we're missing out step 2, which is to develop an action plan alongside the community. So I'm just looking at it from a slightly different angle and saying, so council and the community's involvement have been limited in a way that wasn't anticipated. Are we happy about that?
Well, ideally, we would have followed the process outlined in there, and I guess, yeah, we're not happy that it has to be revised. But I guess it's the situation we find ourselves in. But yeah, I guess it also depends on other people's opinions on how happy they are.
Yeah. Okay. I want to open. I want to put a slightly pointed question here. These used to be called council community plans. If we've taken council out and the community out of a key step, it's not quite a community plan. So I just want to raise the debate. Bruce, comment from over here. Welcome to make it.
Only comment that I'd just make, Bruce, is that yeah, it's what it is, I suppose. That sounds a bit like Donald Trump. It is what it is.
I'm willing to make the sacrifice.
But and it has raised concerns with a number of councillors, not just necessarily the ones on this committee either. And I suppose in some ways it's with our funding constraints, those issues that the community really like to get involved with are the ones that we can't afford anyway. So in effect, although that's happened, those nice to have projects that I suppose that the community is interested in are being displaced pretty much by the high level of capital works and infrastructure. So whether it's actually going to cause a problem with the community or not, yeah, I'm not sure. But from a council or a political perspective, yeah, it's feeling a bit like it's a fait accompli. This is all the money we've got. We've got to spend it on those essential services and looking after what we've got.
I guess the essential part that I saw from this is you know, we even go back to a couple of those risks we talked about, Jim, is indeed it's a delivered product. They haven't been able to be taken on the journey. It's a risk, I think. So yes, go for it.
Through you, the chair. So as you're well aware, we went out to the community in March and April. So community engagement through barbecues and an online survey, and then targeted consultation or engagement with stakeholders across the 4 wellbeing areas. So the feedback that we received from that engagement was actually used to develop the key strategic priorities that have then informed the prioritisation that has been stepped through with the executive team, managers, and with the elected members. You're right about the storytelling, and that is really important. So whilst we're not going to be in a position with time constraints to go back to the community and ask for input into the prioritisation process, we are wanting to go back and engage with the community and tell them how their feedback has actually flavoured the development of the long-term plan in advance of the formal consultation in March. So there is another step with the community pre-formal engagement.
Thanks for that. You've answered my question. Are there any workarounds that are possible? And I hear you saying that's the process. Okay. Cool. Any other questions from councillors on the paper at this stage, or shall we move to Susan?
Look, hi. It was less more of just an observation, and linking back to one of our risks we were raising earlier about reputation, and I kind of have specific following on from what Claire was saying about the consultation with Pirongia. Specific projects that we have actually had the opportunity to consult on, namely the Memorial Park in Te Awamutu and Lake Tukiutu, are probably going to be the 2 big ones, and maybe even Te Arawai to an extent, the ones that we've kind of prepped the community so well on, and unfortunately, through no fault of our own, we're going to find ourselves with a little bit of egg on our face because we can't actually deliver. And I guess I'm pleased to see we have a slight workaround, Kirsty, and that we might be able to explain why that'll be the case. But it is particularly frustrating that those 2 links in terms of that budget preparation and that community engagement can't take place, because it does feel sort of, yeah, reasonably powerless, if you know what I mean, as a community and representatives of the community, where it seemed unable to be in effect the ones making the decisions. But I guess those are the situations and climates we find ourselves in right now. But I was just wanting to flag those few projects, which I think will be the ones that we'll find ourselves under a little bit of pressure on.
Thank you, Susan. Roger?
Yeah, just endorsing what Mayor Jim said, that probably the process that we've gone through was not as involving of elected members as we would have liked to have seen. And it has been registered, and it'll be interesting to see what the next couple of days or next couple of weeks brings out in terms of how the elected members can actually have an input into the priority listings on those capital projects. So currently we're kind of in a unknown waters at this stage. So leave it for the next couple of weeks to see how much communication there is on that priority listing.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments at this stage? Hey, I wonder if we could just turn to a couple of the reports which were really, I think, are quite pivotal to the building the assumptions, which is obviously one of the concerns of the committee, which is an IDEA report, if that's how you say it, NIDEA, and the Infometrics report. Is there things you'd like to draw out for us in those reports, please?
I guess just highlighting the NIDEA report, they're sort of the change to the population projections isn't significant given COVID, but I guess that's a long-term projection, and there's a little bit of conflict with some of the information that we've got from Infometrics regarding the short-term impact. So I understand that we're having Brad Olson from Infometrics speaking to council, and we can probably tease out some of the potential conflicts between the two.
That's an interesting point. Would people like to comment on it? There was thank you for including those. They had been a discussion with the committee previously. Did the committee want to draw any comments on this at this stage? You're having a session with Brad tomorrow. Is that right? Cool. Is there anything that folk wanted to talk about in terms of the assumptions here? We'll leave that for tomorrow.
I'm happy to. Well, I was the one that raised it. The contradiction is that internal migration is forecast to be low, but what we're seeing is, well, from what I'm picking up in the media, is that Auckland is actually suffering a lot from the COVID impacts. And so relatively speaking, Waipa is attractive. And so I was going to be asking Brad whether or not he's been looking at the continued growth or the people relocating down Cambridge and Te Awamutu Way from Auckland. Because what's been in the media is that Auckland businesses are really taking a hit.
Through the chair, I have discussed that with Brad, and he will be talking to that tomorrow. He is well advised that that is an issue of concern for the elected members. With regard to the two documents, we did actually have the University of Waikato review Brad's work and provide feedback. And I guess the benefit is that Brad has been providing us with updates through this process, whereas the university work was at a point in time. But that certainly those issues that have been raised by elected members will be able to be teased out in detail tomorrow. Thank you.
Gary, I think you talked about, when we were talking about some of the risks about, or was it you, Ken, about being nimble? I think that's when we talked about the fiscal settings we were choosing to have in terms of finances. This would seem to me to be an assumption which we probably will almost always be wrong on. It's interesting, isn't it, the population and the economic trends, which suggests actually a bit of nimbleness. Gary, is there something that you want to comment on?
Oh yeah, so that's very much one of the key performance indicators for me for this year. That is to keep a regular flow of projections and data coming through against what's happening on the ground, and so that we can refine our capital works program, particularly in response to growth, and keep looking at those debt to revenue ratios.
Great. Are there any other comments people, thank you for that, Gary. Are there any other comments people would like to make at this stage? Yes, Roger?
Yeah, just anecdotally from Cambridge, although there was a suggestion that there's going to be quite a slowdown in property, the recent sales and amount of time on market for Cambridge has just not seen much of a slowdown. Prices are certainly currently achieving well over the recent valuations. So not seeing that happening yet as far as Cambridge is concerned.
Thank you. By the way, you're just breaking up a wee bit on us there, Roger, but I think we got the gist of what you said. Thank you. Okay, so I would just like, Haven, you to provide any comment you want to, please. I'm back on page 204, which is the sort of yes, 204, which is the major risks, please. Is there anything you want to raise about that at this stage?
I guess there are more risks than last time, but we've got mitigations in place, and that we've brought in some extra resource, external resource to help support the project. And like we've said, we're trying to be nimble with these forecasting assumptions as much as possible. So I guess, yeah, although there are increasing risks, we are putting things in place to try and address them.
Right. Again, committee members, are you comfortable? I look, again, sorry, I refer, as I say, back to 204. That's the high-level summary from the spreadsheet you've given us. Thank you. Not achieving timeframes, which is about the production, lack of resourcing, We've heard about the mitigation, which is additional staff as needed, and an accurate forecast and assumptions. And although we've probably honed in on the one that really seems to count for us, because so much drives off your assessment of population and population growth and economic growth, and an overestimate of the level of work council can do. We haven't discussed that, but that's an ongoing risk, which I guess you're going to have to test. And I sense that, Jim, even from our discussion at lunch about actually what you really can do in terms of either financial ability or indeed over time. Okay, any other comments people would like to make? We're on the basis that we're comfortable those risks are being managed at this stage. Yes, Claire?
Bruce, I'd just like to say I really appreciate the input of Brad Olson. I do find his feedback really good. I was feeling pretty frustrated early on with COVID and the inability of us being able to access specific data relating to Waipa District from the national statistics, like for instance MSD or other business indicators. And so I'm really pleased that Infometrics have been engaged to keep us updated. I do place a lot of reliance on their information.
Good. It certainly seems when I looked at the email that came in at the bottom end of the papers that actually, yes, there is a level of responsiveness there, which is good.
Through you, Chair, just like to talk to these high risks and just say that we do recognise the significance of this project and the risks that it represents for the organisation and indeed the community. So we've talked previously about the governance structure and there are ongoing tweaks being made to that. So you're aware that Gary is the project sponsor for the LTP. Haven and I are now meeting weekly with Gary to keep him abreast of issues. We've now started providing an update to elected members informally through their Friday mail out. I'm just covering off what is occurring this week and next. We've also now got Ken in his CFO Deputy Chief Executive hat attending LTP working group meetings on a weekly basis, so that there is strong financial overview and the ability to report back into the executive team. So we are, I guess, we're fluid in our approach and ensuring that we are trying to front foot issues and manage them as best we can.
So the important thing, Esther, I think I have to take out of this is that our risks have gone up, but we have put in place additional mitigants which actually maintain that risk at an acceptable level. Yeah, and here goes some of it already with at least increased knowledge discussion in the House. Okay, any other questions people would like to raise at this stage or comments? No, we're fine. Can we move then please to the resolution, which I think if I recall is pretty simple. It's on page 200, simply to receive. I'm happy to move that. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jim. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kirsten Haven. Appreciate your time. That's really, really helpful. Insurance update. How am I going for time? Have I 12:50? We're 5 minutes behind. But have we got Deanna on the line? That's Deanna there. Sorry, Deanna.
Yes, we have Bruce. So
sorry, Deanna. Pay to know who your audience is, isn't it? I'm sorry that I didn't recognise you. That's lovely to see you.
Hey, so not only Dee, but we've also got Shane in the square beside Dee.
G'day, Shane.
And of course Deborah as well, who has submitted a written report for the meeting.
Right.
So so Deborah, very happy for you to do the introductions, but I am also aware that Shane and Dee have a presentation. So I think we'll largely take Deborah's report as read, and then perhaps hand over to Shane and Dee to take us through their presentation.
Look, I'm happy to do that. Don't lose sight. If you've got questions on the report, we can deal with those. But Deanna, Shane, if you'd like to rock first, that'll be absolutely fine by me.
Thank you very much. Did you want to run the presentation from your end, or do you want me to share my screen from here?
So look, I'm pretty sure Sam's got. Sam's got it under control. So you have to just give us a sec. It's coming up now, and if you just want to give us a yeah, well, perhaps you probably need to verbally say when you want to flick through a slide.
Okay, not a problem. Thanks, Ken. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for inviting us along to come and talk to you today. As Ken alluded, I'm Deanna McDonald, and Shane Twemlow from Auckland is on the line with us as well. So we're your insurance brokers, and we've just recently been through a tender process with Waikato LAS, BOP LAS, MW LAS, and including the Hawke's Bay councils. And we'd like to thank you very much for reappointing us again. That's lovely. So there's a little bit to cover off over the next, I think we've got 30 minutes. Let me know if we need to shorten that time at all. So I'm conscious of time and we'll just keep moving through, but don't hesitate to ask any questions as we go on. We can move to the first slide, please. So Aon is the broker to approximately 70 councils throughout the country, in some varying capacity. And we've had about 15 years experience in the local government sector. We can provide a range of policies dependent on what the council requires and tailor the program. So that's part of Shane's job, is looking to make sure he gets the right program placement put in for you. We also work with our global risk consulting team to provide independent advice and further enable your understanding of your risks that council face. Moving to the next one, please. So I don't know, some of you may recognise a couple of these faces. Ken was in Auckland with us last week when we were doing our marketing of the infrastructure program to our London and local markets. And he got to meet a lot of these lovely faces. Through the tender process, it was made aware that the council felt throughout the country that we weren't getting out to them enough. And in response, we understood that, and we've formed a practice group. And this is our lovely leadership team. Steve Kane is heading this practice team up. He's based in Auckland and has been looking after the Auckland Council for the past few years, and predominantly looks after construction as well. Paul Mackay's been involved in the local government sector for 15 years. And part of the process of having Steve come on board is looking at that whole succession planning for eventually when Paul decides that he wants to enjoy his retirement. Matthew Wilson and I are based in Hamilton, and we look after yourselves, the Waipa team, as part of the Waikato LAS, as well as the BOP LAS group and Hawke's Bay LAS and the MW LAS. So we've got a team of about 6 people that are predominantly looking after local government in Hamilton. Shane is based in Auckland and looks after your program placement and design, making sure we get everything right for you all. And Sam is looking at the ways of innovations, what different ways that we can look at your risk. Next slide, please. Part of the process, you are all aware that you're involved in the Waikato LAS, obviously, but part of that is inclusive of your insurance benefiting the Waipa DC. So it said earlier, it can provide specific policies to council and look at the different types of loss limits, mitigate your claims, and look at a collective way of doing your marketing. Also the loss modelling, making sure we're getting the right limits on your policies. I'll pass you over to Shane now and he can talk you through the next few slides.
Thanks, Dee. All right, it's about this time of the year where I get out the crystal ball and start talking about where the kind of market is heading. Unfortunately, the kind of overseas insurers and reinsurers continue to be impacted by very large claims worldwide over the last 3 years. In 2019, there was $232 billion worth of natural disaster losses worldwide. Most of those are actually driven by fire, flood, and weather-related type of issues. Fortunately, there's been very kind of low kind of earthquake losses in the last 12 months, but still there was still 41 events that actually each of those events totaled over $1 billion kind of US in each kind of loss. We in New Zealand do not have any kind of New Zealand owned insurance companies anymore. So every time that the overall international insurance market sneezes, New Zealand tends to catch a cold. If we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of locally, the local New Zealand insurance market has been probably hardening here in the last 3 to 4 kind of years, and that's predominantly post the earthquakes in Kaikoura. It started off being only property insurance only, and in the last 2 years you've seen kind of increases in public liability, professional indemnity, travel, motor insurance, as the actual rest of the policy kind of lines catch up to where the actual property market actually is. Most of those increases are typically driven by the premium rating attaching to natural disaster exposure. Council's largest spend is actually in the property insurance portfolio, being infrastructure and both property above ground. The second largest spend is actually on professional indemnity insurance. PI insurance for councils has been under real stress for the last 10 kind of years, even ignoring the previous claims around leaky homes. The new kind of leaky home claims are actually now being put to the courts in a form of structural defect issues. And this is causing multi-million claims kind of losses arising out of all councils in New Zealand in the last 3 years. Unfortunately, due to the actual legal environment we basically have here, council is always going to be the last man standing. We can go to the next slide, thanks. So here is a snapshot of the last 2 years costly kind of natural disasters here in good old Aotearoa. If you look at all of those are all storm or floods, with the exception of the Tasman fires back in 2019. Flood claims are becoming, it's almost no longer may happen, they are going to happen each and every year. Incidentally, the Timaru hailstorm scared the hell out of everybody, and that came in with a claim of 130 million for one particular storm. We can just go to the next slide, thanks. And these are kind of transition slides. So if you can just click a couple of times and again, and again, and again, and leave it there, that's great. Okay. So in terms of our role, I mean, we are trying to actually have our clients understand their exposures and then actually make an informed choice as to how they want to actually handle those exposures. And that can be a combination of around transferring it to an insurance program, or it can be risk management in-house. We've found over the last 15 years of dealing with local authorities is that traditionally everything was actually moved to an insurance policy. As the market has continued to harden and policy coverage in some areas has actually reduced, giving council the tools to actually handle their exposures in-house whilst understanding the impact of actually not transferring everything to an insurance program is the way to actually put together the most cost-effective risk transfer policy at the end of the day. It's all about actually removing the uncertainty for council and at the same time giving you the information to make an informed choice as to how you actually wish to handle any kind of exposure or risk. Go to the next slide, please. And once again, you can just bring those up. Yep, great. Whoop, just back one. Okay. In terms of controlling your premium spend, okay, the single biggest thing you can actually do at the end of the day is to actually understand what you can actually lose in the event of a large natural disaster or a large fire claim. It's all about tailoring the policies to what you can actually use. Do you need to insure every single asset, every single town hall, community hall, toilet block, playground and stuff like that? Because everything you declare as a value has a premium rate attaching to it. The more you declare times the premium rate at the time in the actual insurance market equals the premium you pay at the end of the day. Common, I suppose, levers to control the cost is actually look at increasing policy excesses. Policy excesses historically for most local authorities have been exceedingly kind of low level. In the current insurance market, you are receiving premium relief for increasing those policy excesses upwards. But you also need to have a look at your own individual claims history to actually find that kind of tipping point as to claims paid above the policy excess and what you would actually handle internally all on your own. Just go to the next slide there, thanks. To kind of illustrate that point, if you can just tap, I think, twice more. That's great. And one more. Maybe one more. Yep, great. Okay. This is a very simple frequency versus severity type of scale. You are more likely to have lots of small claims, okay, which is in the blue side at the actual left of the actual graph, than you are to have a large natural disaster, which is at the extreme kind of right end. Finding that sweet spot in the actual pink piece there is the key to not only paying too much premium, but to ensure what you actually need to continue to function as an organisation in the event of a very large claim. It's not only about premium either, it's attracting insurer attention. So no insurers really want to actually be the insurer of choice for a client who is actually making lots of attritional claims, eroding the premium pool that they have, because at the end of the day, if you erode the premium pool you have with one particular insurer, when they come to pay out the large claim, there is no premium left at the end of the day. So finding that kind of sweet spot in the actual middle to attract insurer attention, and the more insurers you can attract to actually want to quote your program, the more competitive tension you have, which ultimately leads to preferential pricing in this market. Go on to the next slide there. Spit these up. So it's all about trying to give councils enough information where they can actually feel they can make an informed choice as to what type of risk transfer program they do actually need. And that's why we spend so much time talking about update on insurance valuations, because they obviously drive the amount of insurance you do actually require. We spend a lot of time talking about what you would actually lose in the event of an actual major claim or natural disaster, and at the same time putting you guys in front of the insurers so you can tell the council story to the actual insurers alongside us. We find having that tripartite insurance arrangement between you guys, us, and the ultimate end insurer is very, very helpful, not only in the event of premium and coverage, but if there is a claim, they actually understand who you guys are as well. Next page there, please. Deanna.
So as part of the tender, we looked at, and we advised that we could provide insurable risk profiling. We've carried this out with the council, with Waipa already. It was a 4-hour workshop, but we actually had to extend this because we couldn't get the right people in the room at the right time, but that's okay. We got there in the end. And we were able to evaluate the council's approach to risk governance, risk management, risk financing, and look at identifying the worst case scenarios so that we can give you more information as far as you're getting the correct insurance, getting the correct cover and the right limits. From this workshop, we will be providing, we're still getting around to finishing this off, but getting the actions for council then to improve their risk profiling and optimise their insurance outcomes. So we're working through this with the 31 councils that were in the tender, and we're slowly working our way around. Unfortunately, we've been delayed a wee bit with COVID, but we'll get there. Okay, next slide, please. There's been a lot of talk lately with councils wanting to have an insurance strategy, and part of the risk profiling is part of the whole process. So it's looking at this diagram. You can see the last slot in there, if you like, up in the top left-hand corner, is your optimizing insurance. If you go to the first one, the purple one, which is determining your risks and understanding your valuations, defining the risks, that's your first start. So that's where we're going at the moment. We're taking this whole journey with you and looking at making sure your valuations are right, that you understand what risks are involved in your business and how you can mitigate those risks, and working your way around. So we're looking at making moving through to the risk positioning, your financial ability, your willingness to accept risk. So that's looking at what the council is willing to take on and finance themselves, as opposed to putting that through insurance. So that's your excess levels and those sorts of things. So that's what the process that we're working through at the moment. I'm hoping that we've kept within time for you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Deanna and Shane. That's really, really superb. I just wonder if we're Deborah, I know we just accepted your report. Was there anything that you wanted to quickly say before I open it for questions?
The main aspect with the report, or what's been highlighted, is that we have had some higher valuations, both in material damage and infrastructure. And with the hardening of markets, we're going to be looking at some greater premiums when we come through in November compared to what we have in previous years. So we'll be building that into our 10-year plan, into the LTP. But other than that, please take the report as being read.
Brilliant. Thank you, Deborah. So critical thing is we renew on 1 November. Deanna, does this mean that the process that you've outlined of risk profiling gets completed presumably prior to us working with you to seek that 1 November placement?
Yes, we are in the process of doing that at the moment. We've already started getting the renewal information through and going to markets at the moment as well. So Shane's currently, well, we've already talked last week to the London markets and local markets on the infrastructure program, so your below ground assets. We're starting to talk with the markets with regards to the above ground assets, and we're going to be putting in the rest of the program in place over the next coming weeks, so that we hope to get information back to you in time for the one renewal that you can make your decisions.
Sorry, keep going, Deanna.
Sorry?
Sorry, keep going. I was about to talk over you. My apologies.
It's all right.
That's right, I do it all the time.
We will get the report out as soon as we can. As I say, there has been a few delays as far as COVID. Our colleague that runs these, Matt Bilderbeck, is based in Auckland, so obviously with him not being able to get out has delayed the process a wee bit, but we are still working on that, and we'll get the report back as soon as we can.
In terms of an update on the actual insurers on the underground infrastructure, historically that has been insured in the international markets only, with no New Zealand insurers actually wanting to participate since about 2009. We have been actually working very hard over the last 2 years to attract some New Zealand participation back into the underground infrastructure. And I'm pleased to advise that there should be at least probably 3 insurers here in New Zealand potentially providing capacity on the underground infrastructure placement for 2020-2021. That's good on 2 fronts, because the actual London market and the actual New Zealand market actually move in different premium kind of cycles. And at last reading, the impact on COVID on the actual Lloyd's market in London is currently estimated to be somewhere between 75 billion and 105 billion US. Lloyd's of London has not actually made any money in the last 5 years. So there's about 109 markets inside Lloyd's of London, and most of those are particularly stressed and are talking premium increases anywhere between 10 and 20% this year. The attraction of the actual local market providing insurance on the underground infrastructure should offset a lot of that kind of increase.
There, Shane, that's I hear the combination of softening us up for higher premiums, but also perhaps there's some mitigations on the horizon.
Pretty much.
Which is I'll emphasise the latter strategy, please. Is there, in terms of getting to the 1 November start line, is there anything more that you need from my part at this stage that we're not aware of?
Not at the moment. I'm still working, this is part of my job for the next week, is going through and seeing what information is currently outstanding. So I'll be in touch with Deborah over the next few days and chatting with her if we've got anything that we require.
Brilliant. If I could just put members' attention, please, then to Deborah's report and her table on pages 238, 239 in the top of 240. Are there any specific questions in terms of the parameters that Deborah's outlined there that members would like to raise?
Mr. Chairman, Deborah, you've mentioned percentage increases. Do you have a gut feel what the quantum's likely to be?
Not really. With the fact our material damage policy, with the commercial buildings, they increased in valuation based on inflation or construction inflation of 5.2. If you have no change at all to your premium, by the sound of things, which won't happen, but our material damage policy will go up by the 5.2% anyway. This is an area that's always very difficult to guesstimate how much until we get very close to the end of October. But we still have time to take into account these sorts of changes into the LTP and we did plan for some increased value of insurance premium in the 2021 annual plan. So I'm sorry, I can't give you actual values at the moment.
And could I ask the dumb question here, please, just to explain for us the difference between Deborah, the infrastructure insurance primary layer and the infrastructure insurance policy?
I'll have a go with it, and then Shane can jump in as well.
No worries, Deborah.
So basically, our where's my listing?
Yeah.
All right, the infrastructure insurance itself is covering our infrastructure for natural disaster, and it has $500,000 excess, but it basically covers the whole lot, anything over, I think, 10 million, which is really our starting point. And that covers for our portion of the amount between council and central government, because central government is supposedly covering a proportion of it. Fairly sure they're the 60%, but I always get confused on that one, Shane.
Yes, that's right.
No, it's the 60%. What we took into account a couple of years ago is actually doing a primary layer, where in some instances it looked like central government may not front up with their 60% to begin with. So we've taken out $10 million of cover on the same assets, but it covers both the 60%, sorry, the 40% we have to cover and the 60% that the government will cover. And it's got a much lower excess on that. So we will actually have assets covered for the full 100% of their value in that primary layer, rather than only the 40%, which is what our infrastructure insurance cover has. And I'll pass that on to Shane if there's any queries.
Shane,
Yeah.
Any comments, Shane?
Yeah, just probably a point of clarification. So the actual assets we're talking about here is the underground pipe network for the stormwater, wastewater, and clean water. Okay. Traditionally, central government has paid 60% of the costs in the event of a natural disaster, providing you can actually prove you can either fund internally the remaining 40% or have an insurance policy standing there as well. The big difference between what you claim on an insurance policy, which is a reinstatement type of policy, compared to what Wellington pay, they will pay for functionality only. So they may not reinstate the actual asset completely. As long as it is actually working, then that's the extent of payment that they actually stump up with. That is why a number of councils have taken the approach to buy a primary kind of layer insurance policy to take away that kind of uncertainty as to what central government will pay at the end of the day.
Thanks for that, Shane. That's very helpful. Appreciate that in the sense of self-insurance for the first 10. When did we last have a claim under this, Gary? Do you know, or Ken? Ages ago.
Oh yeah, like not in recent times. No,
Okay,
not in this space. Not for the underground.
You forget my age. I'm quite old, Ken.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll make the comment. I'll make the comment that I have not been involved in a natural disaster claim with central government, and I've been here nearly 18 years.
Right. Okay. Cool. Are there any other questions? Sorry, Susan. Oh no! Oh, you just. Sorry, I thought you were making a point. Okay. Are there any other questions for Deanna or Shane or Deborah, please? I hope that's been helpful. It means, Ken, that we're looking forward to seeing what the final arrangements are come 1 November. I'm glad that the profiling is going on in the way that you've said, Deanna, and I do appreciate the work that you and Shane are doing, hopefully to place us in the correct position from an insurance perspective. Could I please move to the recommendation, which is simply that it be received, and I think we just also note our appreciation to Deanna and Shane for attending this afternoon. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Roger. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you, Deanna and Shane. We'll leave you
Bye,
free
guys.
for the afternoon. Thank you for spending
Thanks
your
very
time with us.
much.
It's been much appreciated.
No problem.
No worries, guys. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Right, if we can move to the outstanding management report item, that would be great, Sarah. Thank you. I know this is the most exciting paper that you've been keen to come and present on. Not.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, I'll take the majority of it as read. Just again to point out the three new items which we talked about earlier, as well as quite a few that relate to a couple of the same things. One's of sense of expenditure, fraud and corruption policies, which we hope to have closed soon, you know, after audit have checked them. And then there's a few that relate to system administration, many people having that. And now we've got our systems accountant in place. We actually only have one, but of course we've still got last financial year where we had more than one. So hopefully there's a range of recommendations that can close off too. There are also a number that relate to the contracts module implementation. So most of it's underway, and of the items that were new, there's only one outstanding that we actually need to action. So that was the central contractors register.
Thank you.
So through the chair, we did manage to, on the basis of the interim management report, take 3 items out of the table.
Yep.
Yeah, so that audit cleared those during the interim audit, and have signalled a number of the others will be looked at in the final audit.
Yes, so hopefully quite a few of them will drop off by next time I report here.
My presumption is that through the final audit, you hope that all those that you have highlighted as no further action or required will drop off.
Yes, although there are a few of them, such as the EPO system. So we've just recently put contracts and stuff in there, but we've done it, any that expire before the end of the year didn't have to be entered. So we've got a few that will just hang in there, but most of them on there have been actioned.
Yeah, bribery and corruption, I'll give you a chocolate fish for each one you remove, and you can pay me back for the ones that you don't. Okay, Ken, let's go to the one that counts, the big, well, not that counts, but has been the longest there. I think 2014-15.
Yep.
Probably one of the longest management report items I've seen exist inside a set of reports like this. Comfortable we've got this under control?
This is the EPO one.
Yep.
Yes, on page 243. Yeah, look, I think so. As Sarah said, yeah, there's a number of things that we've been doing in that space of recent times. Most particularly contracts. So yeah, we think it's progressing quite well. Yeah, I guess we do need audit perspective on that.
So this means the majority of procurement is now going through our EPO system.
The majority of accounts payable, yeah, but procurement as well is sort of covered by the contracts module that's coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the procure to pay will be a point in time in a total procurement process.
Yes, absolutely.
But I took it their issue was about the completeness of the use of the electronic system and what's not there yet.
So the only things remaining, which we were planning to have implemented by 1st of July to get this off here, but because we ended up sort of having a give and take thing with service delivery because of the contracts being such, the administrative burden of them. So we said, look, if they expire by 31st of December, so now all we need to do is there's a couple of items, some unique stuff such as library invoices, but the only other main item is staff reimbursements. That will need to go through there, and that's a pretty easy process. It's just a matter of implementing the change.
Right. Sorry, I've dominated questions here again. I'm sorry, bad habit. Committee members, is there anything you would like to raise on the report? No. Can we just, for the next time we report, because obviously this isn't, it looks like the 14-15 won't go. Could I just get you to characterise what's left? So I would like for the record for us, sorry, Leon, I know you're in the room, but I would like for us to actually just recognise that we are diminishing the issue actively and what it's down to. Leon, if you're happy with that, that's fine. But I just think for the record, it's important that we do it that way. Leon, seeing you there, sorry, I hadn't realised you were back. Is there anything that you need to say at this stage, mate?
No, Mr. Chair, and I agree with what you're saying, because this is a management document going to governance. So obviously you must reflect your internal processes, and we'll clear it as we work through the final and interim audits.
I look forward to your clearance, and don't take that previous statement of bribery and corruption to heart, mate. Okay, can I move, please, from the chair that we receive Sarah's report? Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Andrew. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Sarah. That's wonderful. Right, capital update. This is one I've been most looking forward to, Peter. Welcome. I take it this is the first time Peter's appeared in front of the committee, because I haven't come up from having worked, dare I say it, with me in Kaikoura. I take it everybody else in the room knows Peter, do they? Or on the screen? Peter, you know everybody here? There we are. So thank you. Hey, welcome, Peter. It's good to see you, man.
And Bruce, Mr. Chairman.
Look forward to what you can tell us about capital development.
Okay, well, good afternoon. The report in front of you is our year-end financial report for the capital program. It's fairly self-explanatory. I think the key issue there was in terms of what wasn't achieved, particularly in the service delivery area, was mainly because of the influence of the COVID lockdown during April, March, April, and into May, which probably 6 to 7 weeks of effectively lost time in the construction season, which resulted in that $7.5 million largely being carried forward. So I don't know that I've got a lot else to say on this particular report. I'm happy to attempt to answer questions.
Probably one or two specifics, Peter, but I might wait for the public excluded session as far as that's concerned. Are there questions that folk have for Peter at this point in time? Brilliant. I've got, actually, when I think about it, no, all my questions are actually public excluded, sorry. So it is what it is. Gary, you and I were talking about this at lunchtime generally. It struck me that we were moving from, a moderate base of development to a very high base for Waipa. Reflect for me previously around about $30 million. Is that right? So this is a trebling of our total spend in any 1 year. So, I mean, COVID does provide a pretty solid, rock solid excuse. It does actually suggest that, as you say, if we hadn't had it, we would have had a fair crack at getting the whole lot through, which actually is superb. I think in that sense, we've got any strategic comms people in the room, I think we should recognise that somewhere down the track. That's superb. So if there's no questions for that, what I'd like to do is ask somebody to move that we receive Pete's overview report for the last year. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, I think, Roger. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Will you just stay in the hot seat there, please, Pete? That'll be great. But I would like to point members to the resolution to exclude public for the reasons that are stated for the remaining items of the meeting. I'll move from the chair that we move into public excluded. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Roger. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? Yep. And Sam, we just let Sam just take a break.